The desert wind carried her confession like a prayer. I haven't bathed in months. Blood crusted under her fingernails, dust caked in her hair, Eliza Carter stood before him. A wild thing carved from desperation. Caleb Morgan's response shattered the silence between them. A low laugh that rumbled like distant thunder. Then he pulled her close, his lips finding hers with a hunger that spoke of understanding rather than judgment. Welcome to a tale of survival, redemption, and unexpected love in the American frontier. Stay with me until the end, and don't forget to comment your city below. I'd love to see how far this story travels. The sun hung like a brass medallion against the bleached sky, its heat pressing down on the desert with the weight of divine judgment. Eliza Carter pressed herself against the shadowed side of a massive boulder, her breath coming in shallow gasps that barely disturbed the dust motes dancing in the scorching air. 3 days. She'd been running for 3 days straight, and the men hunting her showed no signs of giving up. "Mrs. Carter," the voice echoed off the canyon walls, distorted by distance but clear in its threat. "We know you're out here. Make this easy on yourself." She gripped the Colt 45 tighter, its metal warm against her palm. 6 bullets left. 5 men tracking her. The mathematics of survival had never been kind to her, not since Thomas died and left her with nothing but debts and desperate creditors who'd invented crimes to pin on her when she couldn't pay. The voice belonged to Jake Morrison, a bounty hunter with a reputation for bringing his quarries back alive barely. $500, Mrs. Carter. That's what they're offering for you back in Silver Creek, dead or alive. Though I reckon alive pays better. You hearing me?" Eliza's throat burned with thirst. The last of her water had run out yesterday morning, and the desert was teaching her new definitions of suffering. Her dress, once a respectable navy blue, now hung in tatters bleached by sun and torn by thorns. Her boots had split at the seams 20 miles back, and she'd wrapped them with strips torn from her petticoat to keep them together. "She went this way," another voice younger, eager for blood money. "Fresh tracks by the wash." They were getting closer. Eliza forced herself to move, crawling along the base of the rock formation, searching for better cover. The desert offered little mercy, sparse creosote bushes, scattered rocks, and endless expanses of burning sand. In the distance, she could see a dust devil spinning lazily, a column of earth reaching toward heaven like the prayers she'd stopped believing in. Her late husband's voice echoed in her memory. "You're too soft for this world, Eliza. Without me, you'd be lost." Thomas had been wrong about many things, but as she scrambled through the desert like a hunted animal, she wondered if he'd been right about that. The sound of horses grew louder. Eliza pressed herself into a shallow depression in the rock, pulling a dusty brown blanket over herself, trying to become part of the landscape. Through a gap in the fabric, she watched 5 riders appear on the ridge above her. Morrison sat tall in his saddle, his black hat casting a shadow over weathered features. The men with him looked like vultures, lean and hungry, their eyes scanning the terrain with predatory focus. "Check the caves," Morrison ordered. "She's got to be running out of water by now. She'll head for shade." "Boss, what if she's already dead out here?" one of the men asked, spitting tobacco juice onto the sand. "This heat could kill a lizard." "Then we find the body and collect our reward," Morrison replied coldly. "But something tells me Mrs. Carter's got more fight in her than that. Her kind always does the desperate ones." They were right above her now. Eliza held her breath, feeling sweat trail down her spine despite the chill of fear. A scorpion scuttled past her face, its tail curved in a deadly arc, but she didn't dare move. The irony wasn't lost on her here. She was more afraid of men than the desert's natural killers. "Wait," one of the riders said suddenly. "You hear that?" Eliza's heart stopped. Had she made a sound? "Shifted a rock. Sounds like a storm coming," Morrison said, looking toward the horizon. "Perfect. If she's out in the open when it hits, the sand will flay the skin right off her bones." Indeed, the western sky had darkened, a wall of brown advancing across the desert like an army of dust and fury. Sandstorms were common this time of year, walls of particulate matter that could blind a man and fill his lungs with grit. Eliza had never been through one, but she'd heard the stories. "We should find shelter," the youngest rider said nervously. Morrison laughed. "Afraid of a little dust boy." This is perfect. She'll have to hunker down somewhere. We wait it out, then search every possible hiding spot when it passes. She's trapped. They moved on, heading toward a cluster of rocks about a quarter-mile away. Eliza waited until they were out of sight before emerging from her hiding spot. The storm was coming fast, the air already thick with the leading edge of dust. She needed shelter. Real shelter. Or Morrison would be right about the sand flaying her alive. She ran stumbling over rocks and through thorny bushes that caught at her ruined dress. The landscape blurred around her heat mirages, making the distance shimmer like water. Her body screamed for rest, for water, for mercy, but she pushed forward. Survival had stripped her down to pure instinct, every civilized thought burned away by the desert sun. The storm hit like a physical force, a wall of sand and wind that knocked her to her knees. The world disappeared into a brown, howling void. Sand filled her nose, her mouth, her eyes. She wrapped the blanket around her head and crawled forward blindly, her hands searching for anything solid, any shelter from the maelstrom. Her fingers found wood, old weathered, but definitely wood. A structure of some kind. She felt along it until she found an opening and pulled herself inside just as the storm reached its full fury. The relative quiet was shocking after the roar outside. Eliza pulled the blanket away from her face and blinked in the dim light filtering through cracks in what appeared to be an old line shack probably abandoned by cowboys years ago. "Well now," a deep voice said from the shadows, "what do we have here?" Eliza spun her gun, coming up instinctively. A man sat in the corner, barely visible in the gloom. She could make out broad shoulders, a weathered hat, and the glint of eyes watching her with what seemed like amusement rather than threat. "Easy there," he said, raising his hand slowly. "I'm not looking for trouble, just waiting out the storm, same as you." "Stay back." Eliza warned, her voice cracked and raw. The gun shook in her grip, whether from exhaustion or fear, she couldn't tell. "Ma'am, you can barely hold that iron steady," the stranger observed. "When's the last time you had water on—" "That's none of your concern." He moved slowly, deliberately reaching for something beside him. Eliza tensed, but he only produced a canteen. "Concern or not, you need this more than you need to shoot me." The sight of the canteen nearly broke her resolve. Her body screamed for water, every cell crying out in desperation. But she'd learned not to trust easily. "Toss it over here." He complied, sliding the canteen across the dirt floor. Eliza grabbed it with her free hand, never lowering the gun. The first sip was heaven and hell, combined her parched throat, both rejoicing and protesting as the warm water flowed down. She wanted to drain it all, but forced herself to drink slowly, knowing too much too fast would make her sick. "You're running from something," the man said. It wasn't a question. "Everyone in this desert is running from something," Eliza replied, handing the canteen back. He caught it easily. "True enough. Name's Caleb Morgan." She almost laughed at the irony. Morgan. Morrison. The names were too similar for comfort. "You wouldn't happen to be related to a bounty hunter named Jake Morrison?" "Lord, no," Caleb said with genuine disgust. "I've had the misfortune of crossing paths with that vulture before. He tracking you?" Eliza studied him in the dim light. He was younger than his voice suggested, maybe 35, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed cutting. His clothes were those of a working man, worn but clean, practical rather than fancy. There was something in his bearing, though, a straight-backed posture that suggested military training. "What makes you think anyone's tracking me?" she asked. "Ma'am, you're holding a gun on a man who just gave you water. You look like you've been dragged through hell by your hair and you're hiding in a shack in the middle of a sandstorm. Either someone's after you, or you've got the worst luck in the territory." Despite everything, Eliza felt her lips twitch toward a smile. "Maybe both." The storm raged outside, sand hissing against the walls like 1,000 snakes. Inside, the strange peace of two strangers sharing shelter settled over them. Caleb pulled out a wrapped bundle from his pack. "Jerky and hardtack. Not much, but it'll keep you standing." Eliza's stomach clenched at the sight of food. Pride warred with hunger, and hunger won. She lowered the gun slightly. "Toss it over." "How about we make a deal?" Caleb suggested. "You put the gun away, and we share a meal like civilized folks. This storm's going to last hours. We might as well be comfortable." "How do I know you won't?" "Ma'am, if I wanted to hurt you, I could have done it when you crawled in here half dead. Besides," he gestured to his hip, where Eliza now noticed a holstered revolver. I'm armed too. We can either spend the next few hours pointing guns at each other, or we can be human beings. Your choice. The logic was sound, and Eliza was too exhausted to maintain her vigilance. She slowly lowered the gun but kept it in her lap. Caleb nodded approvingly and divided the food, setting her portion on a relatively clean spot on the floor between them. You got a name? He asked, taking a bite of jerky. Eliza hesitated. Mary Johnson. Well, Mary Johnson, you're a terrible liar. He said it without judgment, almost kindly. But I reckon everyone's entitled to their secrets. They ate in silence for a while, the storm providing a constant backdrop of howling wind and rattling walls. The shack held through dust sifted through every crack, coating everything in a fine layer of grit. You from around here? Eliza asked eventually, curiosity overcoming caution. Building a ranch about 10 miles north, Caleb replied. Or trying to. It's slow going when you're working alone. Why alone? Most ranchers have Hans family something. His expression darkened slightly. Sometimes alone is better, safer. For who? Everyone involved. He looked at her directly then, and she saw something in his eyes. She recognized the weight of a past that refused to stay buried. What about you, Mary Johnson? What brings a lady to the desert with nothing but a gun and the clothes on her back? My husband died, she said, surprised to find herself offering even that much truth. Left debts, the kind of debts that follow you. And Morrison's collecting $500, dead or alive. The words tasted bitter. They say I stole from the company store, that I forged documents. All lies, but the truth doesn't matter when powerful men want something. Caleb nodded slowly. No, it doesn't. Justice and law parted ways in this territory a long time ago. The storm's intensity increased, the shack groaning under the assault. Dust fell from the ceiling like snow, covering them both in a fine layer of brown. Eliza found herself shivering despite the heat, the aftermath of adrenaline and exhaustion catching up with her. Here, Caleb said, pulling a coat from his pack. It's not much, but it's better than that blanket. She accepted it gratefully, wrapping it around her shoulders. It smelled of leather and horse and something else, sage maybe. It was the first kindness she'd experienced in weeks, and it nearly undid her composure. Why are you helping me? She asked quietly. Maybe because I know what it's like to be hunted, he replied. Maybe because I'm a fool, or maybe because it's the right thing to do, and I haven't done enough right things in my life. Before Eliza could respond, they heard something over the storm horses. Multiple horses and men shouting. Morrison and his crew had found the shack. Shit, Caleb muttered, moving to peer through a crack in the wall. 5 of them. They're tying up outside. Eliza's heart raced. Trapped. She was trapped with nowhere to run. Listen to me, Caleb said urgently, turning to face her. There's a root cellar under this floor. Covered by boards in the corner. You hide there. I'll handle them. They'll kill you if they think you're hiding me. Maybe. Maybe not. But they'll definitely kill you if they find you. He was already moving, pulling up the floorboards to reveal a dark space below. Quick, before they come in. Eliza hesitated for a fraction of a second, then scrambled for the cellar. It was cramped, musty, full of old preserved goods that had long since spoiled. Caleb replaced the boards above her just as the door burst open. Well, well, Morrison's voice carried clearly through the floor. Caleb Morgan, fancy finding you here. Morrison, Caleb replied evenly. I'd say it's a pleasure, but we both know I'd be lying. You alone in here. As you can see, just waiting out the storm like any sensible man. Eliza heard footsteps moving around the shack boards, creaking overhead. Her hand found her gun in the darkness, though she knew it would be useless if they found her. Funny, Morrison said. Tracks outside suggest 2 people came in here. Could be old tracks, Caleb suggested. This shack's been here for years. Lots of folks use it for shelter. Could be. Or could be you're harboring a fugitive. You know there's a woman we're tracking, Eliza Carter. Killed her husband, stole from the good people of Silver Creek. Haven't seen any women out here. Desert's no place for a lady. Morrison laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin cup. This one's no lady. She's a thief and a killer. $500 to whoever brings her in. That's a lot of money. It is. Enough to make a man think twice about lying to protect a stranger. There was a pause, then Morrison continued. Of course, you always were soft when it came to women in trouble. Remember that incident in Tucson? What was her name, Sarah? That was different. Was it? You lost your commission over that woman. Captain Hartley reduced to nothing because you couldn't follow orders. Eliza's breath caught. Captain Hartley. Caleb was Captain Hartley. She'd heard the name everyone had. The cavalry officer who'd refused to carry out a massacre order, who'd warned a native settlement before an attack. He'd been court-martialed, disgraced, run out of the service. Some called him a traitor. Others quietly called him a hero. I'm not that man anymore, Caleb said quietly. No. Then you won't mind if we search this place properly. Boys check every corner. She's small, could be hiding anywhere. Eliza heard boots moving directly overhead. The boards creaked, dust sifting down onto her face. She held her breath, pressing herself against the earthen wall of the cellar. A spider crawled across her hand, but she didn't dare move. Nothing here, boss, one of the men said. Check for a cellar, Morrison ordered. These old shacks usually have one. This was it. They'd find her. Eliza raised her gun, knowing she'd probably only get one shot before they killed her. She'd make it count, take Morrison with her if she could. The footsteps came closer to her hiding spot. A board lifted slightly, a sliver of light penetrating the darkness. Then Caleb spoke. Morrison, you really want to waste time tearing apart this shack. The storm's getting worse. Your horses are already spooked. Push them much harder in this sand and you'll be walking back to town. Since when do you care about my horses? I don't. But I do care about mine, and I'd like to get back to her before this storm buries everything I own. You want to search every abandoned shack in the desert, be my guest. But the woman you're looking for is probably miles from here by now, if she's even still alive. There was a long pause. The board dropped back into place. You know, Morrison said slowly, if I find out you've lied to me, Morgan, I'll come back for you. The government might have let you walk away from that court-martial, but out here there's no uniform to protect you. Never needed one, Caleb replied. Eliza heard the men moving toward the door, Morrison barking orders about checking the canyons to the east once the storm passed. The door slammed shut, and she heard horses moving away, their sounds quickly swallowed by the storm. She waited counting to 100 before Caleb pulled up the boards. You can come out now. Eliza emerged dusty and shaking. Captain Hartley. His face hardened. That man's dead. I'm just Caleb Morgan now. They said you warned a native village about an attack, saved dozens of lives. And they court-martialed me for it. Conduct unbecoming an officer, they said. Treason, some claimed. He turned away, busying himself with his pack. Ancient history. It was honorable. It was necessary. There were children in that village, women, elderly. The orders were to leave no survivors. I couldn't... He stopped, his hand stilling. I couldn't be that man. They stood in silence for a moment, two outcasts brought together by circumstance and storm. They'll be back, Eliza said finally. Yes. Morrison's like a dog with a bone. He won't give up. Caleb looked at her consideringly. My ranch isn't much, but it's defendable. Good sight lines, water source, solid structures. You could hole up there until you figure out your next move. Why would you take that risk? Because Morrison's wrong about you. You're no killer. I've seen killers look them in the eye before pulling the trigger. You're not one of them. How can you be so sure, bum? Because when you thought they'd find you down there, you raised your gun, but your hand was shaking, not from fear, from reluctance. Killers don't hesitate. They don't shake. You're running from injustice, not justice. Eliza felt tears threaten for the first time since Thomas's funeral. This stranger, this disgraced officer, saw her more clearly than anyone had in years. I don't even know if I can make it 10 miles, she admitted. I'm so tired. The storm will cover our tracks. We leave as soon as it passes travel at night. I know this desert, every wash and canyon. We can avoid Morrison. And then we figure out how to clear your name, or how to get you somewhere Morrison can't follow. You don't owe me anything. Caleb gave her a sad smile. Maybe not, but I owe something to the man I used to be, the one who believed in doing right regardless of the cost. Haven't felt him around in a while, but helping you, maybe that brings him back a little. The storm continued to rage, but inside the shack, a different kind of atmosphere had settled. Two damaged souls recognizing something in each other, a shared understanding of what it meant to have the world turn against you for crimes you didn't commit or for doing what you believed was right. Eliza, she said suddenly. My real name is Eliza Carter. Well, Eliza Carter, Caleb said, extending his hand. Pleasure to meet you properly. She shook his hand, feeling the calluses of hard work, the strength tempered by gentleness. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel entirely alone. As the storm began to subside, they prepared to leave. Caleb packed efficiently, sharing his supplies with her, an extra canteen, more food, a hat to protect her from the sun. Eliza watched him work this man who'd lost everything for refusing to massacre innocents, now risking what little he'd rebuilt to help her. Tell me about your ranch, she said as they waited for the last of the wind to die down. It's not much yet. Main house is half built, but the barn's solid. Got a small herd started, maybe 30 head. There's a sweet water spring that never runs dry and grass enough for grazing. Mountains to the north provide protection from the worst of the winter storms. Sounds peaceful. It is. Lonely sometimes, but peaceful. He glanced at her. Though I suspect peace is about to become a rare commodity with Morrison on our trail. I'm sorry for bringing trouble to your door. Don't be. Trouble was going to find me eventually. Men like Morrison don't forget men like me. At least this way the trouble has purpose. The storm finally passed as the sun began to set, leaving the desert transformed. Drifts of sand had changed the landscape, erasing familiar landmarks and creating new ones. The air was still thick with dust, the sky painted in shades of orange and red that looked like fire. We move fast and quiet, Caleb instructed, checking his rifle. Stay close. The desert at night has its own dangers. They set out into the cooling air, two figures against the vast emptiness. Eliza's legs protested every step, her body running on pure will. Caleb stayed close occasionally, steadying her when she stumbled, his presence a constant reassurance. They'd gone maybe 3 miles when they heard horses moving fast from the south. Down, Caleb hissed, pulling her behind a cluster of rocks. 4 riders passed within 50 yards of their position, heading toward the shack they'd just left. Morrison's men circling back to check again. He doesn't trust you, Eliza whispered. No, he doesn't. Smart man. Caleb watched the riders disappear into the darkness. We need to move faster. He led her through a twisted path only he seemed to see through narrow canyons and across dried creek beds. The moon rose, casting everything in silver light and black shadow. Coyotes called in the distance, their voices echoing off the rocks like ghostly laughter. There, Caleb said, finally, pointing to a cluster of lights in the distance. That's my place. It looked impossibly far to Eliza, but she forced herself forward. One step, then another. She'd come too far to give up now. They were within a mile of the ranch when her legs finally gave out. She went down hard, her knees hitting the rocky ground with enough force to tear through what was left of her dress. I can't, she gasped. I'm sorry, I can't go any further. Without hesitation, Caleb lifted her into his arms. She wanted to protest, but she had no strength left. Her head fell against his shoulder as he carried her the final distance, his breathing steady, despite the burden. Almost there, he murmured. You're safe now, Eliza. I promise, you're safe. The ranch materialized out of the darkness, a half-finished house with solid walls on 3 sides, a complete barn, a corral with a few horses. It wasn't much, but to Eliza it looked like salvation. Caleb carried her inside, setting her down gently on a bed in what would eventually be a bedroom. For now it was just a space with walls and a roof, but it was shelter, and that was enough. Rest, he said. I'll keep watch. Morrison won't find this place tonight. We've got time to prepare. He pulled a blanket over her. Sleep, Eliza. You're safe. As exhaustion finally claimed her, Eliza's last coherent thought was how strange it was to trust a stranger so completely. But something about Caleb Morgan, or Captain Hartley, or whoever he truly was, made her believe that safety wasn't just a word, but a promise he would die to keep. The last thing she heard before sleep took her was Caleb's voice, soft and determined. No one's going to hurt you again, not while I'm breathing. In the morning, she would wake to find him exactly where he said he'd be standing, guard rifle in hand, watching the horizon for the trouble they both knew was coming. But for now, for these few precious hours, Eliza Carter slept without fear. For the first time since her husband's death, protected by a man who understood what it meant to lose everything and still choose to do what was right. The desert wind whispered through the gaps in the walls, carrying with it the scent of sage and the promise of another scorching day. But it also carried something else, the faint possibility of redemption, of second chances, of two broken people finding in each other the strength to stand against the injustices that had driven them to this desolate place. Morrison would come. The $500 bounty would draw others like vultures to carrion. The lies that had been told about her would spread, growing with each telling until Eliza Carter became a legend of the worst kind, the murderous widow, the thieving woman who killed her own husband. But here in this unfinished house on the edge of nowhere, truth had found a foothold. Caleb had seen through the lies, without question recognized in her the same victim of powerful men's whims that he himself had become. Together, they would make their stand. The night deepened, stars emerging in the clear desert sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet. Caleb stood at his post, his silhouette framed by the doorway, a guardian angel in worn leather and dust. He thought about the choices that had led him here, the native village he'd saved, the commission. He'd lost the years of wandering, trying to find a place where his past couldn't follow. Now that past had arrived in the form of Morrison and his reminder of who Caleb used to be. But it had also brought Eliza, and with her a purpose he hadn't felt since putting on the uniform for the first time all those years ago. Protect the innocent, stand against injustice, do what's right regardless of the cost. He smiled grimly at the thought. The cost had been everything once. His career, his reputation, his name. Captain Hartley had died in that court-martial, but perhaps he'd been reborn as Caleb Morgan, a man who could still make a difference, even if only for one person. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another, then another, until the desert rang with their wild chorus. It was a sound that would have terrified Eliza a week ago, but now exhausted beyond fear, she slept through it, trusting in the protection of a man she'd just met, but somehow knew would stand between her and any danger. The ranch house creaked and settled in the cooling night air, its unfinished walls a metaphor for the lives within, incomplete, rough around the edges, but with good bones and the potential for something solid and lasting. In the morning, they would have to face reality. Make plans, prepare defenses, figure out how to prove Eliza's innocence or get her far enough away that Morrison and his ilk could never find her. But that was tomorrow's battle. Tonight there was only the quiet vigilance of a disgraced soldier keeping watch and the peaceful sleep of a wrongly accused woman who'd finally found sanctuary. It wasn't much, but in the harsh arithmetic of the desert where life and death were separated by the thickness of a shadow, it was everything. The first part of their story was ending as the eastern sky began to lighten almost imperceptibly, the blackness softening to deep purple. Soon the sun would rise, bringing with it new challenges and dangers. Morrison wouldn't give up. The bounty would draw others. The truth about what happened in Silver Creek would need to be uncovered and proven. But as Caleb watched the horizon and listened to Eliza's quiet breathing behind him, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not the naive hope of youth, but the hardened, tested hope of someone who'd lost everything and discovered that everything wasn't quite as much as he'd thought. There were still things worth fighting for, still people worth protecting, still chances for redemption even in the most desolate places. The desert had brought them together, two outcasts seeking shelter from storms, both literal and metaphorical. What happened next would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But for now, in these quiet hours before dawn, they had found in each other an unexpected alliance against the cruelties of the world. The morning sun crept across the floorboards like spilled honey, touching Eliza's face with warmth that pulled her from the deepest sleep she'd had in weeks. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the running, forgot the fear. Then memory crashed back, and she sat up quickly, her hand instinctively reaching for the gun that wasn't there. Easy. Caleb's voice came from across the room. He was sitting at a rough-hewn table, cleaning his rifle with practiced efficiency. You're safe. Slept through the whole night and half the morning. Eliza looked around properly for the first time. The room was sparse, but clean tools hung neatly on one wall, a few books stacked on a shelf. Through the unfinished wall, she could see the desert stretching endlessly, already shimmering with heat. "Any sign of Morrison?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Not yet, but he'll come." Caleb set down the rifle and moved to the stove where a pot of coffee sat warming. "You need to eat. Build your strength back up." He handed her a tin cup of coffee and a plate of beans and biscuit. Simple fare, but Eliza ate like it was a feast. Between bites, she studied her rescuer in the daylight. The sun revealed details. The darkness had hidden a scar along his jaw, premature gray threading through his dark hair hands that bore the marks of both violence and honest labor. "How long have you been out here?" she asked. 2 years, give or take. Started building the day after I left Fort Grant. He poured himself coffee, his movements economical. Figured if I was going to be an exile, might as well be a productive one. It must get lonely. Loneliness is just another word for peace, depending on your perspective. He paused, then added, "Though I'll admit having someone to share coffee with isn't unwelcome." A comfortable silence settled between them as they finished their meal. Outside, Eliza could hear horses nickering in the corral, the distant lowing of cattle. Life continuing despite the danger lurking somewhere beyond the horizon. "I should leave," she said suddenly. "Morrison will tear this place apart looking for me. You've done enough, more than enough. I won't have your blood on my conscience." Caleb leaned back in his chair, studying her with those dark eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "Where would you go?" "Mexico, maybe. Somewhere Morrison can't follow." "You wouldn't make it 10 miles in your condition. And Mexico's no paradise for a woman alone, especially one who doesn't speak Spanish." "I'll learn." "Eliza." The way he said her name, gentle but firm, made her stop. "You don't have to run anymore. Not from here." "You don't understand. The men in Silver Creek, they own everything. The store, the bank, the sheriff. They invented those charges because I couldn't pay Thomas's debts they inflated after he died. They wanted the land, you see. Thomas had water rights, good ones. When I wouldn't sell, they decided to take it another way. Then we prove it," she laughed bitterly. "How? My word against theirs. A widow with no friends, no family, no influence. You have me now." The simple statement hung in the air between them. "I may be disgraced, but I still have contacts. Men who served under me who know I was railroaded, just like you're being railroaded. We can fight this." "Why?" The question came out almost as a whisper. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Caleb stood and moved to the window, looking out at his land. "Because once upon a time I took an oath to protect the innocent. The uniform's gone, but the oath remains. And because—" He turned to face her. "Because I recognize something in you. The same refusal to break that kept me going when everything fell apart. You could have given up days ago, but you didn't. That means something." Before Eliza could respond, the sound of approaching horses made them both freeze. Caleb grabbed his rifle, moving to the door with the fluid grace of a trained soldier. Eliza found her gun on the table where he'd placed it, checking the chambers with trembling fingers. "How many?" she whispered. 3 riders. "Not Morrison, though. Stay back." Through the window, Eliza watched 3 men approach. They were Mexican, their horses laden with supplies. Caleb relaxed slightly, though he kept the rifle ready. "Buenos dias, Señor Morgan," the lead rider called out. "Miguel," Caleb replied, stepping onto the porch. "You're early." "See, we wanted to beat the heat. We have the supplies you ordered and news from town." Eliza stayed hidden, listening as the men unloaded goods and talked with Caleb in a mixture of English and Spanish. She caught Morrison's name several times and her blood ran cold. After the men left, Caleb returned inside, his expression grim. "Morrison's put the word out. Every bounty hunter in 3 territories is heading this way. He's raised the reward to $700. $700. Eliza sank into a chair. "That's more than most men see in 2 years. He wants you bad. Question is why a simple theft wouldn't warrant that kind of money." "The water rights," Eliza said slowly, pieces falling into place. "If I'm convicted of murder and theft, the land reverts to the territory, and the territory judge just happens to be Thomas's cousin, who's in deep with the Silver Creek Company. They get the water rights without paying a cent. And Morrison gets his cut for bringing you in." Caleb's jaw tightened. "It's a neat little conspiracy, which we can't prove." "Maybe we can." Caleb moved to his bookshelf, pulling out a leather journal. I've been keeping track of corruption in the territory, names, dates, connections. Your Silver Creek company shows up more than once. They've done this before, Eliza. Driven people off their land, usually through legal manipulation, sometimes through violence. You've been investigating them. Old habits. Once an intelligence officer, always an intelligence officer. I may have lost my commission, but I didn't lose my instincts. He opened the journal, showing her pages of neat handwriting diagrams connecting names and businesses. Look here. 6 months ago, a farmer named Henderson supposedly killed himself after gambling debts. His land had water rights, too. 3 months before that, the widow Patterson died of fever 2 days after refusing to sell. Eliza studied the pages, hope and horror warring in her chest. They killed them. Most likely, but proving it is another matter, unless... Caleb tapped a name on the page. James Murphy. He was the sheriff in Silver Creek before the current one. Got pushed out when he asked too many questions. Last I heard, he was drinking himself to death in Tucson, but he might still have information. Tucson's 3 days' ride. Morrison will be watching the roads. Not all of them. There are old Apache trails through the mountains. Rough going, but passable if you know the way. He closed the journal. But first we need to deal with what's coming. Morrison won't wait long. He'll come here probably tonight or tomorrow. Then I should go. Lead them away. No. We make our stand here. Running just delays the inevitable. Caleb moved to a trunk in the corner, opening it to reveal ammunition, medical supplies, and other necessities for a siege. This house might not look like much, but it's defensible. Good sight lines, multiple escape routes if needed, and that spring means we won't run out of water. You're talking about a siege. Morrison has 5 men, maybe more now with the bounty raised. I've faced worse odds. The quiet confidence in his voice wasn't bravado, Eliza realized. This was a man who'd seen combat, who'd led men in battle. Besides, we might not be as alone as you think. He produced a small mirror from his pocket, moving to the window and flashing it in a specific pattern toward the distant mountains. After a moment, an answering flash came back. Friends? Eliza asked. Of sorts. Apaches. The same village I warned about the cavalry attack. They remember debts. He put the mirror away. They won't fight for us, but they'll watch. And Morrison doesn't know these mountains like they do. If he tries to flank us through the high country, he'll find it harder than expected. The day wore on with preparations. Caleb showed Eliza the layout of the property, the defensive positions where extra weapons were cached. She helped him reinforce windows, fill water barrels, prepare medical supplies. It felt surreal preparing for battle in this half-built house in the middle of nowhere. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, they sat on the porch, rifles across their laps, watching the horizon. Tell me about Thomas, Caleb said unexpectedly. Eliza stiffened. Why? Because if I'm going to risk my life defending you, I'd like to know the whole story. She was quiet for a long moment, then began to speak. Thomas was complicated. He could be charming when he wanted something, cruel when he didn't get it. I was 17 when we married, too young to recognize the signs. He was older, established, seemed like security to a girl with nothing. Did he hurt you? Not with his fists. Thomas was too clever for that. Words were his weapons. Little cuts day after day until I barely recognized myself. You're too stupid to understand business, Eliza. Too ugly for any other man to want you. Too weak to survive without me. But you did survive. When he died, I thought I was free. Then I discovered the debts. Gambling debts, mostly, but also loans he'd taken against the land without telling me. The Silver Creek Company bought up most of the notes, then demanded immediate payment. When I couldn't pay, they manufactured charges to seize the land legally. Thomas would have admired the scheme, she said bitterly. He always said the law was just another tool for smart men to use against stupid ones. He was wrong, Caleb said firmly. The law should protect the innocent, not exploit them. The fact that it doesn't always work that way doesn't make it right. Is that why you warned the village? Or because the law, the orders were wrong? Caleb nodded slowly. 37 people in that village. 13 were children under 10. The oldest was a grandmother who'd lived through the Spanish colonization. They weren't warriors, weren't threats. They were just trying to survive. The orders came down because a settler wanted their land claimed they'd stolen cattle. No proof, no investigation. Just orders to eliminate the problem. So you warned them. I rode ahead the night before, told them to scatter. Most made it to the mountains. When my unit arrived at dawn, we found an empty village. My lieutenant knew immediately what I'd done. How? Because I didn't try to hide it. When he asked if I'd warned them, I said yes. Stood there in that empty village and said yes, I warned them, and I'd do it again. He smiled grimly. The court-martial was a foregone conclusion after that. Do you regret it? I regret that it was necessary. I regret that the system I'd sworn to serve had become so corrupted. But warning them, no. I sleep better knowing those children lived. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness began to creep across the desert. Somewhere in that darkness, Morrison was planning gathering men preparing to come for his bounty. But for this moment, there was peace. Eliza, Caleb said softly, what will you do if we survive this? If we clear your name? I don't know. I've been running so long I've forgotten what it's like to think about the future. You could stay. The offer hung in the air between them, loaded with possibilities neither was quite ready to acknowledge. You barely know me, she said. I know enough. I know you're brave, resourceful, stronger than you think. I know you've been broken but refused to shatter. I know... He paused, choosing his words carefully. I know this place has been too quiet for too long. Before Eliza could respond, a sound made them both tense. Horses, many horses approaching from the south. Caleb raised his field glasses, studying the darkness. Morrison, he confirmed. 8 men total. He's recruited more. 8 against 2. 8 against 2 who have the high ground, better cover, and more to lose. Caleb stood checking his rifle one final time. Get inside, take the east window. Don't fire unless you have a clear shot and make every bullet count. Eliza moved to comply, then stopped. Caleb, if something happens... Nothing's going to happen except Morrison learning what happens when he pushes good people too far. He gave her a reassuring smile. Go on. They'll be in range soon. The riders stopped just outside of rifle range, their torches creating pools of flickering light in the darkness. Morrison's voice carried clearly across the desert air. Morgan. I know she's in there. Send her out and we ride away. No harm comes to you or your property. Can't send out what I don't have, Morrison, Caleb called back. Don't play games with me, Captain. Oh yes, I know all about you. The disgraced officer, the traitor who chose savages over his own people. You really want to die for another lost cause. The only lost cause I see is you thinking you'll take anyone from this house. Morrison laughed. 8 guns against 2. You may be good, Hartley, but you're not that good. Want to bet your life on that? There was a pause, then Morrison spoke again. Mrs. Carter, I know you can hear me. These charges against you, they can be dropped. The men in Silver Creek just want their money. Come with me, sign over the land rights, and you walk free. No trial, no noose. You have my word. Your word isn't worth the breath you waste speaking it, Eliza called from the window. Brave words for a woman hiding behind a disgraced soldier. How long do you think he'll protect you when the bullets start flying? Men like him, they talk about honor, but when it comes down to it, they save themselves. Just ask the men who served under him, the ones who got court-martialed for following his orders. Caleb's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. You've got 1 minute to turn around and ride away, Morrison. After that, we settle this the hard way. The hard way it is, then. The first shot shattered the window near Eliza's position, showering her with glass. She dropped low, her heart pounding. More shots followed the house, suddenly alive with the sound of splintering wood and breaking glass. Stay down, Caleb shouted, returning fire from his position. Eliza peered through the broken window, saw a muzzle flash, and fired. The man cried out and fell from his horse. Her second shot sent another rider scrambling for cover. That's my girl, Caleb muttered, picking off a third man who'd tried to flank them. The firefight intensified, bullets peppering the house from multiple directions. Morrison's men had spread out using the darkness and desert terrain for cover. But Caleb had been right about the defensive position. The house's elevation gave them clear shots at anyone who tried to approach. The barn! Eliza shouted, seeing 2 men sneaking toward it with torches. Caleb shifted position, his rifle barking twice. Both men went down their torches, extinguishing in the dirt. They're trying to burn us out. Watch for more. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably less than 30 minutes. Eliza's world narrowed to the simple rhythm of spot, aim, fire, reload. The girl who'd fled Silver Creek in terror was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who refused to be prey any longer. A lull fell over the battlefield. 3 of Morrison's men were down dead or wounded. The others had pulled back, regrouping. "Morgan," Morrison called out. "This doesn't have to continue. Give her up and we leave. You've made your point." "The only point I've made is that you underestimated us. Leave now and you might make it back to town with enough men to buy a round of drinks." "You think you've won. I've got more men coming. The whole territory wants that bounty. You can't hold out forever." "Maybe not," Caleb admitted. "But I can hold out longer than you can afford to wait. Every day you're here is a day you're not chasing other bounties. Every man you lose is profit cut from your take. How long before your remaining men decide $700 split 8 ways isn't worth dying for?" There was murmuring from Morrison's position, voices raised in argument. Caleb had hit a nerve. "Besides," Caleb continued, "you might want to look behind you." Morrison and his men turned to see lights approaching from the north, many lights moving fast. "That would be the Apache war party I signaled this morning," Caleb lied smoothly. "Seems they remember who warned their village, and they're not fond of bounty hunters. You've got about 3 minutes before they get here." It was a bluff, but Morrison didn't know that. The lights were actually Miguel and his brothers coming back with lanterns after hearing the gunfire, but in the darkness and confusion, they looked like a much larger force. "This isn't over," Morrison snarled. "The law's on my side." "The law should be on the side of justice," Caleb replied. "When it's not good, people have to make their own justice." Morrison and his remaining men mounted up and rode hard toward town, not willing to risk facing what they thought was an Apache war party. Miguel and his brothers arrived minutes later, weapons ready. "Senor Morgan, are you hurt?" Miguel called out. "We're fine, Miguel. Thank you for the timely arrival." "We heard shooting. My brothers and we don't like Morrison. He tried to cheat us on cattle prices last year. Would you and your brothers consider staying the night? I'd pay you for your time. Extra guns might discourage Morrison from trying again too quickly." "See, we stay, but no payment needed. Friends help friends." As Miguel and his brothers set up a watch around the property, Caleb found Eliza standing among the broken glass and splintered wood, her gun still in her hand, tears streaming down her face. "Hey," he said softly, gently, taking the weapon from her grip. "It's over. You're safe." "I shot them," she whispered. "I shot those men." "You defended yourself. There's no shame in that. Thomas died of sickness despite what they say. I've never killed anyone before." Caleb pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against him, the adrenaline finally giving way to shock. "You did what you had to do. Morrison brought violence to our door. You didn't ask for this." "Our door," she repeated, pulling back to look at him. "Sorry, I meant—" "No," she interrupted, surprising herself with a small smile. I liked how it sounded. "Our door." They stood there in the shot-up remains of his house, 2 damaged souls who'd found each other in the desert, who'd stood together against those who had harmed them. Outside, Miguel called out that all was clear, that no riders were approaching. The immediate danger had passed, but both knew this was far from over. "Morrison will be back," Eliza said. "Yes, but not tonight. And tomorrow we start fighting back properly. We go to Tucson, find Murphy, get the evidence we need." "You'd do that. Leave your ranch, risk everything. This ranch will still be here when we get back. And as for risk," he touched her face, gently wiping away a tear with his thumb. "Some things are worth any risk." In that moment, standing in the wreckage of the day's violence, something shifted between them. The desperation that had brought them together was transforming into something else, something neither had expected to find in this desolate place. "I must look a sight," Eliza said, suddenly aware of her torn dress, her tangled hair, the dirt and blood that marked her as a survivor of too many battles. "You look like a warrior," Caleb said simply, "like someone who refuses to break." "I almost did. So many times I almost gave up." "But you didn't. That's what matters." Miguel appeared in the doorway. Senor Morgan, we've set up a perimeter. My brothers will take shifts. You and the Senora should rest. She's not, Caleb began, but Eliza interrupted. Thank you, Miguel. We appreciate your help. After Miguel left, Caleb raised an eyebrow at her. Senora Morgan, would you prefer I correct him? Explain that I'm the fugitive widow everyone's hunting. Good point. He surveyed the damage to his house. Well, Mrs. Morgan, our home has seen better days. It's still standing, she pointed out. That's more than Morrison expected. They spent the next hour boarding up the worst of the damage, making the house somewhat habitable again. As they worked side by side, Eliza found herself stealing glances at this man who'd risked everything for her. He moved with easy confidence, competent and calm, despite the chaos they'd endured. You're staring, he said, without looking up from the board he was nailing into place. Just wondering what I did to deserve such a champion. You survived. You endured. You refused to let them win. He set down his hammer and faced her. In my experience, that makes you worth fighting for. And what about you? What makes you worth fighting for? I'm not sure I am. I am, she said firmly. A man who loses everything for doing the right thing, then builds a new life from nothing, who helps a stranger without asking for anything in return. That man is worth an army. You might want to reconsider that assessment. I'm difficult set in my ways. I talk to my horses more than people, and I have a tendency to make enemies of powerful men. Sounds perfect to me. They stood facing each other in the lamplight, the tension between them shifting from companionship to something deeper. Caleb reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Eliza, when this is over, don't, she interrupted. Don't make promises about after. Not yet. Let's just survive first. He nodded understanding. Then let me say this right now. In this moment, I'm exactly where I want to be. In a shot-up house with a fugitive widow, with a brave woman who's teaching me that maybe isolation isn't the answer to betrayal, that maybe trust is still possible even after everything. Before Eliza could respond, Miguel's brother called out from his watch position. Riders approaching just 2 from the east. Caleb grabbed his rifle but relaxed when he saw who it was. It's Tom Brennan and his son, good people neighbors from the next valley. The Brennans rode up carefully, hands visible. Morgan heard shooting earlier, came to see if you need help. Appreciate it, Tom. We had some trouble with Morrison, but it's handled for now. Tom Brennan, a weathered rancher in his 50s, dismounted and approached. Morrison's bad news. He's in town right now trying to drum up more men, offering a bigger cut of the bounty. How many? Maybe a dozen, interested, but most folk don't trust him. Word is, you've got Apache backing that true. Caleb smiled slightly. Let's just say I have friends Morrison doesn't know about. Good enough for me. Tom looked past Caleb to where Eliza stood in the doorway. Ma'am, this is my cousin Mary, Caleb said. She's visiting from back east. Tom wasn't fooled for a second, but played along. Pleasure, Miss Mary. Hell of a time for a family visit. Yes, well, timing never was our family's strong suit, Eliza replied. Caleb said, I need to ask a favor. We need to get to Tucson quietly. Morrison will be watching the main roads. The old Apache Trail through Devil's Canyon. That's what I was thinking. Tom scratched his beard thoughtfully. Dangerous route, but my boy knows it well, did some prospecting up there last summer. He could guide you? I'd pay him well. No payment needed. Morrison tried to muscle me off my water rights last year. Any enemy of his is a friend of mine. Tom turned to his son. Jake, you up for a ride to Tucson? Jake Brennan. A young man about 20 nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. When do we leave? Dawn, Caleb decided. Morrison won't expect us to move that fast. After the Brennans left to prepare for the journey, Caleb and Eliza finally had a moment of quiet. They sat on the porch looking out at the star-filled desert sky. It's beautiful, Eliza said softly. I never noticed before when I was running. The stars, I mean. Different when you're not afraid, Caleb agreed. Fear has a way of blinding us to beauty. Are you afraid now? No, concerned, alert, ready for whatever comes, but not afraid. He looked at her. I should be terrified. Morrison's still out there. The charges haven't been dropped. We're about to ride into more danger, but sitting here with you, I feel safe. It doesn't make sense. Feelings rarely do. She leaned against his shoulder, a gesture so natural it surprised them both. Tell me about after. When this is over, when my name is clear, what happens to us? I thought you didn't want to talk about after. I changed my mind. I need something to hope for. Caleb was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. I see you staying, helping me finish this house, making it a real home. I see us building something together, not just walls and roofs, but a life. I see mornings with coffee on this porch, evenings watching the sunset paint the mountains. I see... He paused, then continued more softly. I see myself falling in love with you more each day, if you'll let me. Eliza's breath caught. Caleb, I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving, still healing. I'm not asking for anything now except the chance to earn your trust, maybe eventually your heart. You already have my trust. As for my heart... She turned to look at him. It's been dead so long I'd forgotten it could beat. But when you carried me to safety that night, when you stood between me and Morrison, when you look at me like I'm worth saving, it's starting to remember how to feel again. He cupped her face gently. You are worth saving, worth fighting for, worth everything. Their lips met soft and tentative at first, then with growing passion. It was a kiss born of survival and recognition of two souls finding in each other what they'd thought lost forever. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Well, Eliza said, a smile playing at her lips. That was unexpected. Was it? I've wanted to do that since you pointed a gun at me in that shack. You have strange tastes, Mr. Morgan. Caleb. Just Caleb. Caleb, she repeated, liking how it felt on her tongue. What have we gotten ourselves into? Something complicated, dangerous, and probably foolish. Sounds perfect. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the night deepen around them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the dangerous ride to Tucson, finding Murphy gathering evidence against the Silver Creek Company. Morrison would regroup, the bounty would draw more hunters, and the odds would remain stacked against them. But tonight they had a moment of peace in the eye of the storm, a connection forged in fire and tested by violence, a promise of something worth fighting for beyond mere survival. We should rest, Caleb said eventually. Dawn comes early, and we've got hard riding ahead. I don't want this moment to end. It doesn't have to. Just transforms into the next moment and the next. That's what life is, Eliza, a series of moments. We just have to make them count. She stood, pulling him up with her. Then let's make them all count. As they went inside, Miguel called out that all was still quiet. The desert had returned to its nocturnal peace, but everyone knew it was temporary. Morrison was out there planning recruiting, driven by greed and wounded pride. The Silver Creek Company wouldn't give up their scheme easily. The law, corrupted as it was, would still call Eliza a criminal. But in this shot-up house in the middle of nowhere, two people had found something worth the fight. Not just survival, but the possibility of redemption, of love, of a future neither had dared imagine. The second part of their story was ending with the promise of a journey both physical and emotional. The ride to Tucson would test them, but it would also bind them closer together. Every mile traveled, every danger faced, would forge their partnership stronger. In the bedroom, Eliza found blankets laid out on the floor. Caleb had given her the bed and made himself a pallet nearby. You don't have to sleep on the floor, she said softly. Yes, I do. You're a lady, you get the bed. I haven't felt like a lady in a very long time. Then maybe it's time you started again. She lay down on the narrow bed, acutely aware of his presence just feet away. Caleb? Yes. Thank you for everything, for seeing me as more than a fugitive or a victim. Thank you for reminding me that protecting someone isn't a burden, it's a privilege. Sleep came slowly, both of them listening to the night sounds, aware of each other's breathing, thinking about what tomorrow might bring. Outside, Miguel and his brothers kept watch. The desert kept its secrets, and somewhere in the darkness, their enemies plotted. But in this moment, none of that mattered as much as the simple fact that they were no longer alone. Two people who'd lost everything had found in each other a reason to keep fighting, keep hoping, Keep believing that justice and love might still be possible in a world that seemed determined to deny both. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles. But beneath them, Eliza Carter and Caleb Morgan had created their own constellation, two lights in the darkness burning brighter together than they ever could apart. Dawn came like a whisper across the desert, painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold that seemed too gentle for the harsh land they illuminated. Eliza woke to find Caleb already up loading supplies onto the horses with Jake Brennan's help. Through the window, she watched him work, noting the efficient way he moved, the careful attention he paid to every detail of their preparation. "Morning," Miguel said from the doorway, offering her a cup of coffee. "Senor Morgan asked me to bring this to you when you woke." "Thank you, Miguel, and thank you for staying last night." "De nada. Morrison is a snake. Snakes should be watched carefully." He paused, then added, "Be careful in the mountains, senora. The trail is treacherous and Morrison has eyes everywhere." She dressed quickly in the clothes Caleb had found for her men's pants and shirt that fit reasonably well, sturdy boots that were only slightly too large, and a hat to shield her from the sun. When she emerged, Caleb stopped what he was doing to look at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "What?" she asked, self-conscious. "You look ready for whatever come," he said simply, "like you belong out here." Jake Brennan, young and eager, was checking his rifle for the third time. "Pa says the trail hasn't been used much since the Apache troubles last spring. Might be some washouts from the monsoons." "We'll manage," Caleb assured him. "Your father says you know these mountains better than anyone." "I spent 3 months up there looking for silver. Never found any worth mining, but I learned every trail, every water source." The boy's pride was evident. "Morrison won't expect us to go through Devil's Canyon. Most folks think it's impassable." "Most folks would be right if they didn't have a guide who knew the secrets," Caleb said, clapping the young man on the shoulder. "Ready to ride." They mounted up just as the sun cleared the horizon, 4 riders heading into the mountains that loomed like ancient guardians to the north. Eliza rode beside Caleb Jake, taking point with a pack horse carrying supplies, bringing up the rear. Miguel and his brothers watched them go, standing guard until they were out of sight. The first few miles were easy, following a well-worn cattle trail through scrub and sand. But as they climbed higher, the path narrowed, becoming little more than a suggestion between massive boulders and thorny vegetation. Jake led them with confidence, occasionally pointing out landmarks or warning of particularly treacherous sections. "See that rock formation," he said, indicating a series of stones that looked like a giant staircase. "Apache lookout post. They'd signal from there when the cavalry was moving through the valley." "Still used?" Caleb asked, scanning the rocks with professional interest. "Sometimes. But the Apache know I'm friend, not foe. I helped one of their wounded warriors last winter, brought him medicine from town. They remember such things." As if to prove his point, a figure appeared briefly on the rocks above an Apache scout watching their passage. Jake raised his hand in greeting, and after a moment the figure returned the gesture before disappearing. "Good to have them know we're here," Caleb murmured to Eliza. "They'll warn us if Morrison tries to follow." The trail grew steeper, switching back and forth across the face of a cliff that dropped away to dizzying depths. Eliza kept her eyes fixed on Jake's back, trusting her horse to find its footing. Stones kicked loose by their passage clattered down the mountainside, the sound echoing in the vast silence. "You're doing fine," Caleb said, riding close behind her. "Just trust the horse, and don't look down." "Wasn't planning on it," she replied, her knuckles white as she gripped the saddle horn. They stopped at midday in a small meadow where a spring bubbled up from the rocks, the water cold and sweet. Jake watered the horses while Caleb and Eliza sat in the shade of a massive pine sharing dried meat and hard biscuit. "How much further to the canyon?" Caleb asked. "Another 3 hours to the entrance," Jake replied. "Then it's a full day through to the other side, assuming we don't hit any problems." "Problems? Flash floods, rock slides, the usual, but the sky's clear and the rocks look stable. We should be fine." Eliza noticed Caleb studying the surrounding peaks with the intense focus of a military man assessing terrain. "What is it?" she asked quietly. "Just thinking. This would be a perfect place for an ambush. High ground on all sides, limited escape routes." "You think Morrison?" "No, Jake's right, he wouldn't expect us to come this way. But old habits die hard. I spent too many years looking for threats to stop now. Is that how you live, always expecting danger? It's how I've survived. Trust is a luxury I couldn't afford after the court-martial. But you trusted me. He looked at her, then his expression softening. Yes, I did. Still can't entirely explain why, except that when I looked at you that night in the shack, I saw someone who'd been broken by the world's cruelty but refused to let it make her cruel in return. That's rare, Eliza. Rare and precious. Before she could respond, Jake called out that they needed to keep moving. The afternoon sun was brutal as they climbed higher, the air thin enough that both horses and riders breathed heavily. The landscape changed from desert scrub to pine forest, the scent of resin heavy in the air. They reached Devil's Canyon as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. The entrance was a narrow gap between towering red rock walls, barely wide enough for two horses abreast. Water had carved the canyon over millennia, leaving behind smooth curves and hollows that looked organic, almost alive. Stay close, Jake warned. The canyon plays tricks with sound and direction. Easy to get lost if you don't know the way. They entered single file, the temperature dropping immediately in the shadow of the walls. Their horses' hooves echoed off the stone, creating an eerie chorus that seemed to come from all directions. Above, the sky was reduced to a narrow strip of blue, already darkening toward evening. They'd gone perhaps a mile when Caleb suddenly held up his hand, signaling a stop. Listen, he whispered. At first, Eliza heard nothing but their own breathing and the occasional snort from the horses. Then faintly, she caught it, the sound of voices echoing off the canyon walls. Behind us, Jake said, his face pale. Someone else is in the canyon. Morrison. Eliza asked, her hand moving to her gun. Could be anyone, Caleb said, but his expression was grim. Jake, is there anywhere we can get off the main trail? There's a side canyon about a quarter-mile ahead. Leads to a dead end, but there's an overhang where we could hide. Let's go. Quietly. They moved as swiftly as they dared, the voices behind them growing clearer. Definitely multiple riders moving fast. Jake led them into a narrow side passage that Eliza would have missed entirely, the entrance hidden by a fold in the rock. They dismounted, leading the horses deep into the shadows beneath a massive overhang. Hold the horses, Caleb told Jake, then motioned for Eliza to follow him. They crept back toward the main canyon, finding a vantage point behind some fallen rocks. The riders came into view moments later, 5 men heavily armed, wearing the dust-covered clothes of hard travel. But it wasn't Morrison. These were Apache, and they looked angry. Renegades, Caleb whispered. Probably raiding across the border. Will they find us? Not if we stay quiet. They're moving fast, not searching. The Apache warriors passed without slowing their voices, fading as they continued through the canyon. Caleb and Eliza waited a full 10 minutes before returning to where Jake held the horses. Apache war party, Caleb explained, heading north probably to hit a cavalry patrol or supply wagon. Jake looked shaken. I've never seen them hostile before. The ones I know are peaceful. Different band. The peaceful ones are Reservation Apache. These are Broncos still fighting the war everyone else has given up on. Caleb checked his rifle. We need to keep moving. If they run into cavalry in this canyon, we don't want to be caught in the middle. They continued deeper into Devil's Canyon as darkness fell, making camp in a widening where ancient floods had carved out a sandy floor. Jake built a small fire against the rock wall, its light barely reaching the opposite side of the canyon. No one will see it, he assured them. The canyon walls block the light, and the smoke dissipates before it reaches the top. They ate a simple meal in relative silence, the events of the day weighing on them. Eliza found herself sitting close to Caleb, drawing comfort from his solid presence. Tell me about Tucson, she said to Jake, trying to lighten the mood. I've never been there. It's growing fast, the young man replied, eager to talk about something other than the danger surrounding them. Railroad came through 2 years ago, changed everything. There's proper hotels now, restaurants, even a theater. Of course, there's also more saloons than churches, and the law is still pretty loose. Perfect place for someone like Murphy to disappear, Caleb noted. Big enough to get lost in, lawless enough that no one asks questions. You really think this Murphy fellow will help? Jake asked. If we can find him, and if he's sober enough to talk, maybe. He was a good lawman before Silver Creek corrupted everything around it. He might have kept evidence documents something we can use. And if he doesn't, then we find another way, Caleb said firmly. We don't give up. Eliza stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. What if there is no other way? What if the corruption goes too deep? There's always a way, Caleb said. Sometimes it's not the way we expect or want, but it exists. The truth has a way of surfacing even when powerful men try to bury it. You have more faith in justice than I do. Not faith in justice, faith in persistence, in refusing to let them win. He looked at her across the fire. Faith in you. Jake excused himself to check on the horses, giving them a moment of privacy. Caleb moved closer to Eliza, his arm going around her shoulders. You're scared, he observed. Terrified, she admitted. Not of Morrison or the Apache, or even dying. I'm scared of hoping, of believing this could actually work out. Hope is frightening when you've lived without it. How do you do it? How do you keep believing after everything that's happened to you? He was quiet for a long moment, considering. Because the alternative is letting them win. The men who court-martialed me, who wanted that village destroyed, if I give up, they win. If I become bitter and hateful, they win. The only victory I have is to keep being the man they couldn't break. And what about me? What victory do I have? You're sitting here free fighting back. That's victory. You're not in a jail cell or a noose or signed over your land. Every day you stay free is a day they don't win. She turned to look at him, firelight playing across his weathered features. When did you become so wise? Somewhere between losing everything and finding you. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of trail dust and possibility of two people finding unexpected sweetness in the bitter desert. When they parted, Eliza rested her head on his shoulder, feeling safer than she had in years. After this is over, she began, then stopped. What? I want to learn to be happy again. I've forgotten how. We'll learn together, he promised. We'll finish the house, build a real ranch, create something worth having. What if I'm not who you think I am? What if without the danger and the drama, I'm just ordinary? Then I'll count myself lucky to have found an ordinary woman extraordinary enough to survive what you've survived. Jake returned, settling down on the opposite side of the fire. Horses are good. We should start early tomorrow. The hardest part of the canyon is ahead. They arranged their bedrolls, Caleb positioning himself between Eliza and the canyon entrance, protective even in sleep. Eliza lay awake for a long time, listening to the profound silence of the canyon, broken only by the occasional call of a nightbird or the distant yip of a coyote. She must have dozed because she woke to Caleb's hand on her shoulder, his voice urgent in her ear. Rider's coming. Get up quietly. Jake was already awake, fear evident in his young face. The sound of horses echoed off the canyon walls, making it impossible to tell how many or how close. The same Apache, Eliza whispered. No, these horses are shod, white men's horses. Morrison. Somehow he'd figured out their route. Can we outrun them? Jake asked. Not in this canyon. Too narrow and they know we're here. Caleb was already checking his weapons. We make our stand here. 3 against however many, Eliza protested. The canyon works for us too. They can only come at us 1 or 2 at a time. He positioned them behind rocks, creating a defensive position. Jake, you watch our backs in case they sent men around. Eliza, you're with me. The riders came into view, torches blazing, 7 men, Morrison in the lead. They stopped just outside rifle range, Morrison's voice carrying clearly in the confined space. Nice try, Morgan. But did you really think I wouldn't have men watching every route out of the territory? How did you find us? Caleb called back. Your young guide there has friends who talk when offered enough money. Knew you were heading for Devil's Canyon before you'd gone 10 miles. Jake made a sound of anguish. I didn't tell anyone except... His face crumbled. Oh, God. Pete Sanders. We've been friends since childhood. He wouldn't... Everyone has a price boy, Morrison called out. His was $300, more than he'd see in a year of ranch work. I'm sorry, Jake whispered to Caleb. I'm so sorry. Not your fault, Caleb said firmly. You trusted a friend. No shame in that. Here's the situation, Morrison continued. You're trapped. Canyon's a dead end behind you and we're in front. Surrender the woman and you two can ride out. Keep fighting and all three of you die here." "Counter offer," Caleb replied. "You turn around and leave and I don't put a bullet between your eyes." Morrison laughed. 7 against 3 and you're making threats. 7 men in a narrow canyon with no cover against 3 with good positions and nothing left to lose. I've had worse odds. You military men always thinking you're invincible, but you're not Captain Hartley anymore. You're just a broken-down rancher protecting a murderer. She's no murderer and you know it. What I know is that she's worth $700 and I mean to collect." Without warning, one of Morrison's men fired the bullet sparking off the rock near Eliza's head. The canyon erupted in gunfire, the sound deafening in the confined space. Caleb and Eliza returned fire, their shots disciplined and effective. 2 of Morrison's men went down in the first exchange. "Fall backs!" Morrison shouted, his men retreating around a bend in the canyon. "They'll try to wait us out," Caleb said, reloading. "We need another plan." "The side canyon," Jake said suddenly. "The one we hid in. It doesn't dead end, not really. There's a chimney, a crack in the rock. I've climbed it. Comes out on top of the mesa." "Can the horses make it?" "No, but we can. It's a hard climb, but possible." "In the dark?" "I've done it in daylight. With luck, we could manage." Caleb considered. "It's better than sitting here. Morrison will send men around, eventually try to get above us." They gathered what supplies they could carry, Caleb taking extra ammunition while Eliza packed food and water. Jake looked miserable about leaving the horses. "They'll be fine," Caleb assured him. "Morrison wants us, not them." They crept back to the side canyon, moving as silently as possible. The chimney Jake had described was barely visible in the moonlight, a vertical crack in the rock face that looked impossibly narrow. "I'll go first," Jake said. "Follow exactly where I put my hands and feet." The climb was nightmarish. The rock was smooth in places, crumbling in others. Eliza's hands were soon bloody from sharp edges, her muscles screaming from the effort. Below they could hear Morrison's men moving into their former position, curses echoing up when they found it abandoned. "They're climbing out," someone shouted. "I can see them." A shot rang out, the bullet whining off the rock near Caleb's shoulder. He was bringing up the rear, the most exposed position. "Keep climbing," he urged. More shots followed, but the angle was bad for the shooters. The chimney twisted and turned, providing some cover. Jake reached the top, first turning to help Eliza up the final few feet. She collapsed on the mesa top, gasping for air. Caleb was halfway up the final section when his foothold crumbled. For a heart-stopping moment, he dangled by his fingertips, his body swinging free over the deadly drop. "Caleb!" Eliza lunged forward, grabbing his wrist just as his grip failed. Jake grabbed his other arm, and together they hauled him up onto solid ground. They lay there panting for a moment, then Caleb pulled Eliza into a fierce embrace. "Thank you." "We're not safe yet," Jake warned. "Morrison will find another way up. There's a trail about a mile south." "Then we keep moving." Caleb stood pulling Eliza to her feet. "How far to Tucson from here?" "On foot 2 days if we push hard." "Then we push hard." They set off across the mesa, the landscape alien in the moonlight. Behind them they could hear Morrison's men shouting, arguing about who would attempt the climb. But they had a lead now, and Jake knew this country. As dawn approached, they descended the far side of the mesa via a treacherous game trail. Eliza's legs shook with exhaustion, but she forced herself to continue. They had to reach Tucson, had to find Murphy. It was their only chance. "There," Jake pointed to lights in the distance. "That's Mescal, a mining town. We can get horses their supplies." "Morrison will expect that," Caleb said. "Maybe, but we need horses if we're going to reach Tucson ahead of him." They approached the town carefully, but it was barely awake, only a few miners heading to early shifts. Jake knew the livery owner, an old prospector named Dusty, who asked no questions when offered good money for 3 horses and supplies. "Trouble following you?" Dusty asked, eyeing their disheveled appearance. "The kind that's best avoided," Caleb replied. "Morrison, among others." Dusty spat tobacco juice. "Never liked that bastard. Take the horses out the back way. Follow the wash north for 3 miles before cutting east. He'll expect you to take the main road." They rode hard through the morning, switching horses at a way station where Jake knew the owner. By afternoon, Tucson appeared on the horizon, a sprawling collection of adobe buildings and new construction smoke from the railroad yards hanging in the air. "We need to find Murphy fast," Caleb said. "Morrison won't be far behind." "The saloons," Jake suggested. "If he's drinking himself to death, that's where he'll be." They started with the worst establishments, the ones where broken men went to disappear. It was in the fourth saloon, a decrepit place called The Last Chance, that they found him. James Murphy sat alone at a corner table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey before him. He'd aged badly, thin, unshaven, his clothes shabby, but his eyes, when he looked up at them, were still sharp despite the alcohol. "Well, well," he said, his voice rougher than sandpaper. "Caleb Morgan, heard you were dead." Disappointed. Relieved, actually. Means there's still one honest man in the territory. Murphy's gaze shifted to Eliza. "And you'd be the widow Carter. You look better than your wanted poster." "Mr. Murphy, we need your help," Eliza said. "I'm nobody. Can't help anyone, including myself." "You were sheriff in Silver Creek," Caleb said, sitting down across from him. "You know what really happened there," Murphy laughed bitterly. "Knowing and proving are different things. But you have proof, don't you?" Caleb leaned forward. "That's why they just pushed you out instead of killing you. Insurance, in case you decided to talk." Murphy was silent for a long moment, then reached into his coat and pulled out a leather portfolio. 6 months I've carried this. 6 months of drinking, trying to forget what's in here." "What is it?" Eliza asked. "Everything. Documents proving the Silver Creek Company has been stealing land for years. Forged deeds, falsified debts, even murder made to look like accidents. Your husband's death is in here too. Thomas was murdered. Poisoned. Slow-acting stuff that mimics fever. They needed him dead to get to the land, but it had to look natural." Murphy opened the portfolio, revealing pages of evidence. "The company doctor confessed before he died. Guilty conscience, I suppose." Eliza's hands shook as she looked at the documents. "This could clear my name. Could get you killed, too, eh?" Murphy warned. "The company has judges, lawmen, even federal marshals on their payroll." "Then we go to the newspapers," Caleb said. "Make it public before they can stop us." "Already tried that. Editor of the Tucson Herald told me to leave before he called the law." "Then we go bigger. The San Francisco papers, maybe even back east." Murphy studied them for a moment, then pushed the portfolio across the table. "Take it. Do what I couldn't. But know this, the moment you use this, you'll have targets on your backs forever." "We already do," Eliza said quietly. "No, you have Morrison after you for money. Use this and you'll have the company after you for revenge. They don't forgive and they don't forget." Before anyone could respond, Jake, who'd been watching the door, hissed a warning. "Riders coming, lot of them." Through the grimy window, they could see Morrison and at least 10 men surrounding the saloon. "Back door," Murphy said, suddenly, sober. "Through the kitchen. There's an alley that leads to the old mission." "Come with us," Eliza urged. "I'm done running. Besides, someone needs to slow them down." Murphy pulled out a gun Eliza hadn't known he carried. "Go. Make those bastards pay for what they've done." They slipped through the kitchen as Morrison's men burst through the front door. Gunfire erupted behind them, Murphy's last stand against the corruption he'd once served. The alley was narrow and dark, filled with refuse and stray dogs. They ran, Jake leading them through a maze of back streets toward the old mission. Behind them, shouts and more gunfire suggested Murphy was giving them the time they needed. The mission was abandoned, its adobe walls crumbling, but it provided cover. They hid in the bell tower, watching as Morrison's men spread out through the town, searching. "We need to get to the newspaper office," Caleb said. "Not the Herald, the Citizen. They're newer, hungrier for stories." "Morrison will be watching it," Jake pointed out. "Then we create a distraction." Caleb studied the town layout from their elevated position. "Jake, can you get to the railroad yard? There's usually dynamite there for clearing rock. You want me to blow something up?" "Just enough to draw attention. Give us time to get to the newspaper." Jake grinned. "I can do that." As sunset approached, they put the plan in motion. Jake slipped away toward the railroad yard while Caleb and Eliza waited. 20 minutes later, an explosion rocked the town, not huge, but enough to send everyone running toward the yards. They reached the newspaper office, Just as the editor, a young man named Patterson, was heading out to investigate the explosion. "Mr. Patterson," Caleb caught his arm. "We have a story for you, the biggest story of your career. I don't... The Silver Creek Company. Murder, corruption, land theft. We have proof." Eliza held up the portfolio. Patterson's eyes widened. He was young, ambitious, exactly what they needed. "Inside quickly." They spread Murphy's evidence across his desk. Patterson examined each document, his excitement growing. "This is incredible. This could bring down half the territory's power structure." "Can you print it?" Caleb asked. "I can do better. I can telegraph it to papers in San Francisco, Denver, even New York. By tomorrow, the whole country will know." "Do it," Eliza said. As Patterson began working transcribing the most damning evidence for the Telegraph, Jake returned soot-stained but grinning. "Morrison's men are all at the rail yard. Set a tool shed on fire after the explosion. They think we're trying to escape on a train." "Good work." Caleb clapped him on the shoulder, then turned to Patterson. "How long?" "An hour to get everything ready. Then it goes out on the wire." "We'll stand guard." They positioned themselves at the windows, watching for Morrison's return. The hour passed slowly, Patterson's pen scratching steadily as he worked. "There," he finally announced. "Ready to send." But as he reached for the telegraph key, the door burst open. Morrison stood there, gun-drawn fury etched on his face. "Step away from that telegraph," he snarled. "Free press, Morrison," Patterson said bravely. "You can't stop the truth." "Watch me." Morrison raised his gun toward the young editor. Eliza moved without thinking, stepping between them. "No, no more killing. Get out of the way, woman. You want your bounty, take me. But let him send the story. The bounty's nothing compared to what the company will pay to keep this quiet." "Then you're not just a bounty hunter," Caleb said, his own gun now drawn. "You're one of them, part of the conspiracy." Morrison smiled coldly. "I'm a businessman, and this is bad for business." The standoff stretched taut, 4 guns drawn, everyone waiting for someone else to make the first move. Then from outside came a sound that changed everything, horses, dozens of them, and a voice calling out with military authority. "This is Colonel Marcus Wade of the Federal Marshals. The building is surrounded. Everyone come out with hands visible." Morrison's face went pale. "You called the Federals?" "Murphy did," Patterson said quietly. "Before he died, he sent a telegram to a friend in the Marshal's service. One of the few honest ones left." "You're all under arrest," Morrison said desperately. "She's a fugitive, and they're aiding her." "We'll let the Marshals sort that out," Caleb said, "unless you'd prefer to shoot it out with federal officers." Morrison looked around wildly, realizing he was trapped. His men were scattered across town, and he was facing federal authority that even the Silver Creek Company couldn't easily corrupt. "This isn't over," he snarled, but he lowered his gun. They filed out of the newspaper office to find a dozen federal marshals waiting Colonel Wade at their head. He was an older man, gray-bearded, with the bearing of someone who'd seen too much corruption to be surprised by anything. "Mrs. Carter," he addressed Eliza directly. "Yes, sir." "James Murphy was a friend. His dying message said you had evidence of corruption that goes all the way to Washington. Is that true?" Eliza handed him the portfolio. Wade examined it briefly, his expression darkening. "Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, and about a dozen other charges I'll think of on the way to jail." "You can't." "I can, and I will." Wade nodded to his men, who efficiently disarmed and shackled Morrison. "As for you, Mrs. Carter, the charges against you are hereby suspended pending federal investigation. You're free to go." Eliza sagged against Caleb, relief making her knees weak. It was over. Or at least this part was over. "Mr. Patterson," Wade addressed the editor, "I trust you'll print this story accurately and thoroughly." "Every word, Colonel." "Good. The people deserve to know the truth." As Morrison was led away, still cursing and threatening, Caleb turned to Eliza. "It's over. You're free." "We're free," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." Jake whooped with joy, the tension of the past days finally releasing. "We did it. We actually did it. Patterson was already back at his telegraph sending the story across the wires. By morning, the Silver Creek Company's crimes would be front-page news across the country. Colonel Wade approached them one more time. "Morgan, I remember you, the Hartley court-martial. Bad business, that. Ancient history, Colonel. Perhaps, but I've always believed you did the right thing. If you ever want to wear a badge again, I could use men like you. Thank you, but I've got a ranch to run. And someone to run it with, I see." Wade tipped his hat to Eliza. "Ma'am, you've got courage. Morgan's a lucky man." As the federal marshals departed with their prisoner, the three unlikely allies stood in the dusty street of Tucson watching the sun set over the desert. The danger had passed, the truth was spreading across telegraph wires, and justice for once had prevailed. "What now?" Jake asked. "Now we go home," Caleb said, taking Eliza's hand. "We've got a house to finish building. Together." Eliza asked, though she already knew the answer, "If you'll have me." After all this, how could I say no? They found rooms at a decent hotel, their first real rest in days. Jake took his own room, giving them privacy they hadn't had since this adventure began. As Eliza bathed away the dust and fear of the past days, she heard Caleb speaking quietly to someone in the hall, Colonel Wade offering additional testimony if needed. When she emerged clean and wearing a simple dress, the hotel had provided Caleb was waiting with a meal laid out. Nothing fancy, but real food on real plates, eaten in safety. "I could get used to this," she said, savoring each bite. "The food or the company?" "Both. Definitely both." They talked late into the night, planning their future. The ranch would need work, especially after the damage from Morrison's attack. But with the threat removed and Eliza's name clear, they could build something real, something lasting. "I want to raise horses," Eliza said. "Good ones, the kind the cavalry needs. I know bloodstock. We could make that work. And I want to help other women in my situation, women trapped by circumstance or cruel men. A sort of underground railroad for abused wives." "Something like that." Caleb reached across the table, taking her hand. "Eliza Carter, you continue to surprise me." "Is that good?" "It's perfect." The morning brought unexpected visitors to their hotel room. Eliza had barely finished dressing when a knock came at the door. Caleb answered it cautiously, his hand near his gun despite the danger having passed. Old habits died hard. "Mrs. Carter." A well-dressed man stood in the hallway holding a leather briefcase. "I'm William Thornton, attorney at law. I've been sent by Judge Samuel Harris of the Federal Circuit Court." "What does the federal court want with her?" Caleb asked, not moving aside. "To make things right, Mr. Morgan. May I come in?" They received him in the small sitting area. Eliza perched nervously on the edge of her chair, while Caleb stood behind her, protective as always. "Mrs. Carter, the evidence you provided has led to the arrest of 17 individuals, including 3 judges, 2 sheriffs, and most of the Silver Creek Company board. The federal government is deeply grateful." "I just wanted my freedom," Eliza said quietly. "You'll have that and more. The investigation has revealed that your late husband's debts were indeed fraudulent, manufactured after his death. Furthermore, there's evidence that the company not only poisoned him, but also destroyed his will, a will that left everything to you free and clear." Eliza's breath caught. "Thomas wrote a will." "He did. We found a copy in the company's own files, ironically enough. They kept it as insurance against their forger. Your husband may have been difficult, Mrs. Carter, but he did ensure you were provided for. The land, the water rights, everything is yours." "I don't want it," she said immediately. "Too much blood on that land." "Then sell it," Thornton suggested. "The government is prepared to offer you fair market value, $15,000. The sum was staggering. Eliza looked at Caleb, who nodded slightly. It was enough to build a real ranch to start fresh without the shadow of the past hanging over them. "There's more," Thornton continued. "The federal government would like to offer you a position, Mrs. Carter. Your courage in exposing this corruption has impressed certain people. They're creating a new department to investigate land fraud and protect settlers' rights. They need someone who understands what victims go through." "I'm no investigator," Eliza protested. "You wouldn't be investigating. You'd be an advocate helping victims navigate the legal system, ensuring their voices are heard. The position is based here in Tucson with occasional travel required." Eliza looked at Caleb again. This was unexpected, a chance to help others as she'd mentioned the night before, but in an official capacity. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. Take your time. The offer stands. Thornton rose to leave, then paused. Mr. Morgan, there's been discussion about you as well. Your military record has been reviewed in light of recent events. There's talk of a posthumous commendation for the men who followed your orders and a restoration of your commission if you want it. I don't, Caleb said firmly. That life is behind me. I thought you might say that, but know that the offer stands and your honor has been restored in the eyes of those who matter. After Thornton left, they sat in stunned silence. Jake, who'd been listening from the adjoining room, burst in. $15,000 and a government job. This is incredibly... It's overwhelming, Eliza corrected, sinking back in her chair. Yesterday, I was a fugitive. Today, they want me to work for the government. Life has a way of turning quickly, Caleb said, sitting beside her. The question is, what do you want? I want to go home, she said simply. Back to your ranch. Our ranch. I want to see if what we found in all this danger and desperation can survive normal life. And the job offer can wait. If we're going to build something together, I need to know it's real first, not just shared adversity. Caleb took her hand. It's real. At least for me. For me too. But I've made decisions in desperation before. I married Thomas because I was desperate for security. I won't make that mistake again. You're saying you need time. I'm saying I need to know you when you're not saving my life. And you need to know me when I'm not running for mine. Jake cleared his throat. Should I leave you two alone? No, Eliza said, smiling at the young man. You're part of this too. You risked everything to help us. It was the right thing to do, Jake said, blushing slightly. Your father will be proud, Caleb told him. And if you ever want work, my ranch could use a hand who knows the mountains like you do. I might take you up on that, after I try my hand at prospecting one more time. I've got a feeling about a spot up near Devil's Canyon. They left Tucson that afternoon purchasing supplies and good horses with some of the money Thornton had advanced against the land sale. The ride home was different from their desperate flight, leisurely, even pleasant, despite the memories that certain landmarks evoked. Feels strange, Eliza said as they camped the first night out. Not being afraid. You'll get used to it, Caleb assured her, though he still kept his rifle close and his eyes on the horizon. They reached the ranch 3 days later to find it much as they'd left it, though Miguel and his brothers had clearly been by the worst of the damage from the firefight had been repaired and fresh supplies were stacked on the porch. Good neighbors are worth their weight in gold, Caleb observed. Speaking of which, Eliza said, pulling out a purse, Jake, this is yours. She handed him $500. Hazard pay. I can't take this, Jake protested. You can and you will. You saved our lives in that canyon. Jake accepted the money reluctantly, then surprised them both by saying, I'll use it to help my folks improve their ranch. Pa's been wanting to dig a new well. As Jake rode off toward home, promising to visit soon, Caleb and Eliza stood together looking at the half-built house that had become their fortress and might now become their home. Where do we start? Eliza asked. With dinner, Caleb said practically. Then we figure out the rest. They worked side by side, preparing a simple meal, the domesticity of it both foreign and comfortable. As they ate, they talked about practical things, what needed fixing, what supplies to order, how to expand the horse operation Eliza envisioned. We'll need better breeding stock, she said. There's a ranch near Phoenix that has Arabian bloodlines. Expensive, Caleb noted. We have money now. Might as well invest it in something worthwhile. $15,000 won't last forever. No, but it's enough to start properly. And if I take that government job, eventually we'll have steady income. You're considering it. I'm considering everything. But first I want to know who we are without crisis driving us together. That night they slept in separate rooms, Eliza in the bedroom, Caleb in what would eventually be a study. The propriety of it seemed almost absurd after everything they'd been through, but it also felt necessary, a way of establishing new boundaries for their new life. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. They rose with the sun, worked on the house and ranch, until the heat became unbearable, rested through the worst of the afternoon, then worked again until dark. It was hard physical labor that left them exhausted but satisfied. Miguel visited on the fourth day, bringing his wife Rosa, a warm woman who immediately took Eliza under her wing. "You need proper clothes for ranch work," Rosa declared, looking at Eliza's worn dress with disapproval. "I'll make you some. And you need to learn to cook for this climate. Come, I'll teach you." As the women worked in the kitchen, Miguel and Caleb discussed business. "Morrison had debts in town," Miguel said. "With him arrested, people are talking. Your story, Senora Carter's bravery, it's becoming legend." "Legends are usually far from truth," Caleb replied. "Perhaps, but legends inspire. Already 2 other widows have come forward about false debts, forced land sales. The federal marshals are investigating." "Good. No one should go through what Eliza did. She's strong, that one. You're lucky to have found each other." "We're not." "It's not official," Caleb said awkwardly. Miguel laughed. "My friend, the way you look at each other, it's only a matter of time." A week passed, then 2. The house began to take shape. Walls completed a proper roof, installed windows that weren't shot out. Eliza proved surprisingly adept at construction work. Her small hands nimble with tools, her eye for detail catching problems before they became serious. "You're full of surprises," Caleb told her one evening as she expertly fitted a door frame. "Thomas never let me do anything practical. Said it wasn't ladylike. Turns out I like working with my hands." "It suits you." She was covered in sawdust and sweat, her hair escaping from the kerchief she'd tied around it, and Caleb thought she'd never looked more beautiful. "You're staring again," she said without looking up. "Getting to be a habit." "Good habit or bad?" "Good. Best habit I've ever developed." Their easy partnership was tested when Tom Brennan arrived with disturbing news. "There's been trouble in Silver Creek," he reported. "With the company executives arrested, the town's falling apart. People are settling old scores, looting general chaos." "That's the federal marshal's problem," Caleb said. "Maybe. But there's something else. Some of Morrison's men, the ones who weren't arrested, they're talking revenge, saying you and Mrs. Carter destroyed their livelihoods." "How many?" Caleb's voice had gone cold professional. 4, maybe 5. Led by a man named Garrett. He was Morrison's second. "I remember him. He was one of the ones shooting at the house. They're gathering men promising shares of hidden Morrison money to anyone who helps them." Eliza had gone pale. "It's starting again." "No," Caleb said firmly. "This time we're not running. This time we're not alone." He turned to Tom. "Spread the word. Anyone comes for us, they come for the whole valley. We stand together." "Already done. Every rancher within 20 miles knows the situation. You've got support, Morgan." After Tom left, Eliza sat heavily on the porch steps. "I thought it was over." "It is over. This is just the Echo men who can't accept that their world has changed." Caleb sat beside her. "We knew there might be repercussions. I'm so tired of being afraid." "Then don't be. We've faced worse than Garrett and survived. We were lucky. We were prepared. And we will be again." That night, Eliza knocked on Caleb's door. He opened it to find her standing there in her nightgown, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "I can't sleep alone," she admitted, "not with this hanging over us." He stepped aside, letting her in. She curled up in the chair by his window while he returned to the narrow bed. "Tell me about your family," she said into the darkness. "You never talk about them." "Not much to tell. Father was a minister, mother a school teacher. Both dead now. Fever took them while I was at West Point. No siblings." "So you're alone too." "Was alone. Not anymore." "Even if I can't be what you want." "Eliza, you're already more than I ever hoped to find. Whatever you can give whenever you're ready to give it is enough. You're too patient with me." "I'm exactly as patient as you deserve." She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I loved Thomas once, or thought I did. He was charming when he wanted to be, made me feel special, chosen. It wasn't until after we married that I saw the cruelty beneath. By then I thought it was too late. It's never too late to escape cruelty. But the scars remain. I find myself flinching when you move too quickly, apologizing for things that don't need apology, Thomas trained me well to be small, quiet, invisible. You're none of those things. You stood up to Morrison, faced down armed men, exposed corruption that went to the heart of the territory. That's not small or quiet. That was desperation. That was courage. And you have it in abundance even if you don't see it yet. She moved from the chair to sit on the edge of his bed. What if Garrett comes? Then we deal with him. Together. You make it sound simple. The best things usually are. Complicated is what other people add to make themselves feel important. She laughed softly. Is that military philosophy? Ranch philosophy. Out here you learn what matters, water, shelter, food, safety. Everything else is decoration. What about love? That matters too, maybe most of all. She leaned down and kissed him soft and sweet. Thank you for everything. Eliza, I'm not ready for more. Not yet. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying, that I want to be ready. There's no timeline, no expectations. I know. That's what makes you extraordinary. She returned to the chair, wrapping herself in the blanket, and they spent the night like that, him in the bed, her in the chair, finding comfort in proximity without pressure. Morning brought Jake Brennan riding hard into the yard. They're coming, Garrett and 8 men about 5 miles out. Caleb was already moving, checking weapons, positioning supplies. Did your father tell? He's gathering the neighbors. But they might not get here in time. Then we hold until they do. Caleb turned to Eliza. You don't have to do this. You could ride out the back way. And leave you never. I'm serious. This is my fight now. No, it's ours. Everything from now on is ours. They prepared their defense quickly but thoroughly. Jake took position on the roof with his rifle. Eliza barricaded windows while Caleb distributed ammunition to strategic points. Just like last time, he told her, trying to project confidence. Except last time we had Miguel and his brothers. We have Jake. That boy's worth 3 men with a rifle. Garrett and his men arrived as the sun reached its zenith, spreading out in a semicircle around the house. Garrett himself was a thin, dangerous-looking man with dead eyes and a permanent sneer. Morgan, he called out, send out the woman and we ride away. Getting tired of hearing that demand, Caleb called back. Answers the same as before, go to hell. Morrison's in federal prison because of you two. Good men lost everything because of your lies. Morrison's in prison because he's a criminal, and if you were riding with him, you're no better. Last chance, Morgan. Give us the woman or we burn you out. Try it. The first shots came from the left, trying to flank them. Jake's rifle answered, and a man cried out, falling from his horse. The battle was joined gunfire erupting from multiple directions. But this time was different. This time Eliza felt no fear, only cold determination. These men had chosen to continue Morrison's vendetta, and she was done being hunted. She fired steadily, carefully making each shot count. Beside her, Caleb worked with mechanical precision, covering angles, watching for threats. Rider coming from the north, Jake shouted. But it wasn't one rider, it was a dozen. Tom Brennan led the charge, the valley's ranchers coming to their aid as promised. The odds suddenly shifted, and Garrett's men knew it. Pull back, Ward! Garrett shouted, but it was too late. The ranchers had them surrounded, guns drawn, faces grim. These were men who'd built lives in the harsh desert, who understood justice and injustice, who'd decided that Eliza and Caleb were worth protecting. Drop your weapons, Tom Brennan commanded. Most of Garrett's men complied immediately, recognizing defeat. But Garrett himself wheeled his horse, trying to escape. A single shot rang out Jake's rifle, and Garrett tumbled from his saddle, clutching his shoulder. Nice shooting, son, Tom told Jake, who was climbing down from the roof. The captured men were tied up awaiting the federal marshals, who Tom had already sent for. Garrett, wounded but alive, glared at Eliza with pure hatred. This isn't over, he snarled. There are others who remember what you did. Let them come, Eliza said quietly. I'm done running. This is my home, and I'll defend it against anyone who threatens it. Our home, Caleb corrected, putting his arm around her. The ranchers stayed until the marshals arrived, sharing food and stories, turning what could have been a day of violence into an unexpected celebration of community. These people had chosen to stand with them, to risk their lives for relative strangers simply because it was right. You've got good neighbors, Miguel observed, having arrived with the second wave of supporters. The best, Caleb agreed. As the sun set, painting the desert in familiar shades of gold and red, the ranch finally quiet again. Eliza stood with Caleb on their porch, their damaged, patched, but still standing porch. "I think it might actually be over now," she said. "The violence, maybe, but we're just beginning." She turned to face him. "Caleb Morgan, are you courting me?" "I've been courting you since you pointed that gun at me in the shack." That's a strange foundation for romance." "We're strange people. It fits." She laughed, the sound free and genuine. "I need to tell you something. I've made a decision about the government job." "Oh, I'm going to take it, but only part-time. 3 days a week in town, the rest here, building our ranch." "Our ranch? I like how that sounds." "There's a condition, though." "What's that?" "I want us to be married first, properly married, not this pretend arrangement for the neighbors. I want to face whatever comes as your wife, if you'll have me." Caleb pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. "Eliza Carter, that's the best offer I've ever received." "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes to everything. Marriage, the ranch, the future, all of it." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, two souls who'd found each other in the crucible of danger and discovered something worth any risk, love, trust, and the promise of tomorrow. Inside the house, Jake was regaling anyone who'd listen with his version of the day's events, the story already growing in the telling. The ranchers laughed and added their own embellishments, creating the legend that would be told in the valley for generations. But on the porch, Eliza and Caleb were writing their own story, one of second chances and hard-won happiness. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of rain. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the sound no longer threatening, but simply part of the landscape they'd chosen to call home. "When?" Caleb asked. "When do you want to marry?" "Soon, before I lose my nerve." "You've faced down gunmen and corruption. I doubt a wedding will scare you. You'd be surprised. At least with gunmen, I knew what to expect." "What do you expect from marriage?" "I don't know. That's what terrifies and excites me in equal measure. With Thomas, I knew exactly what each day would bring: criticism, control, casual cruelty. With you, every day is a mystery. A good mystery, I hope. The best kind. The kind where you know the ending will be happy, even if you don't know how you'll get there." They stood together as the ranchers began to leave, each one stopping to congratulate them on their victory and reading the intimacy between them, their obvious future, together. "About time," Rosa told Eliza with a knowing smile. "That man's been in love with you since he carried you through his door. How could you tell the way he looked at you, like a man seeing sunrise after a long, dark night?" As the last visitor left and quiet settled over the ranch, Eliza and Caleb surveyed their domain, damaged but not destroyed, challenged but not conquered. "We should go to town tomorrow," Caleb said. "See the preacher make arrangements. And get supplies to finish the house. Can't have a proper wedding in a half-built home." "Why not? Seems fitting for us starting something while still building." "You're right. Besides, I don't want to wait." Impatient Mrs. Soon-to-be Morgan. Decisive. There's a difference. They went inside the house that had sheltered them through so much violence, now offering peaceful refuge. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, finishing the house. Starting the horse breeding operation, Eliza's new position, helping other victims of land fraud. But tonight, they had each other and the certainty that whatever came, they would face it together. As Eliza prepared for bed in her room, still maintaining propriety for a few more days, she heard Caleb moving about in the familiar sounds, now comforting rather than alerting. Through the thin walls, she heard him humming something, a melody she didn't recognize but found soothing. "What's that song?" she called out. "Something my mother used to sing, about finding home in unexpected places." "Sing it for me." His voice came through the wall, untrained but sincere, singing about travelers who lost their way, only to discover their destination was better than their original goal. It was a simple song, but in Caleb's voice it became their anthem. When he finished, Eliza said softly, "That's us, isn't it? Lost travelers who found something better." "Much better, Ma," he agreed. "Caleb." "Yes. I love you. I should have said it sooner, but I was afraid it was just gratitude or desperation. But it's not. It's real. There was a pause, then she heard his footsteps. He appeared in her doorway, his expression tender. I love you too, Eliza. Have since you refused to break despite everything the world threw at you. That's a strange thing to love someone for. No stranger than loving someone for singing to you through a wall. She laughed. Do you think we'll always be this odd? I hope so. Normal is overrated. He kissed her forehead gently, then returned to his room, maintaining the boundaries they'd set until their wedding. But the words had been said, the promises made. The rest was just time and ceremony. The next morning arrived with unusual clouds building over the mountains, promising the rain the desert desperately needed. Eliza woke to find Caleb already hitching the horses to the wagon, preparing for their trip to town. She dressed carefully in the best dress Rosa had made for her, a simple blue cotton that somehow made her feel more like herself than any of the fancy gowns Thomas had insisted she wear. You look beautiful, Caleb said when she emerged, his eyes warm with appreciation. You clean up well yourself, she replied, noting he'd put on his best shirt and actually trimmed his beard. The ride to town took 3 hours, the horses moving at an easy pace while storm clouds gathered overhead. They talked about practical things, what supplies they needed, which horses to buy for breeding stock, how to arrange Eliza's schedule once she started her government position. 3 days in town, 4 days at the ranch, she mused. We'll need to get you help for when I'm gone. Already thought of that? Jake's interested in learning the horse business. His prospecting hasn't panned out, and he's got a good hand with animals. Perfect. We'll be giving him a future while getting the help we need. They reached town just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. The preacher, Reverend Thompson, was a thin elderly man with kind eyes who listened to their story with growing amazement. So you want to marry immediately? He asked when they finished. As soon as possible, Eliza confirmed. We've waited long enough. I can perform the ceremony tomorrow if you'd like. Nothing fancy, but legal and binding. That's all we need, Caleb said, then hesitated. Actually, Reverend, there's something else. Eliza was married before, and there might be those who question the propriety. Mr. Morgan, the Reverend interrupted gently. I've heard your story. The whole town has. Any woman who survived what Mrs. Carter survived who stood up to such corruption and violence has earned the right to happiness. And any man who'd protect her as you have is welcome in my church. The rain was coming down steadily as they left the church, turning the dusty streets into rivers of mud. They took shelter in the general store, purchasing supplies while waiting for the worst of the storm to pass. Mrs. Carter, the store owner. Mr. Peterson greeted her warmly. Heard about your troubles with Morrison. Glad to see you're safe. Thank you, Mr. Peterson, and it will be Mrs. Morgan tomorrow. About time, Martha, he called to his wife. Mrs. Carter and Mr. Morgan are getting married tomorrow. Within minutes, word had spread through the store and into the street despite the rain. People Eliza had never met were congratulating them, offering help, expressing joy at their happiness. It was overwhelming and wonderful simultaneously. Is this what it's like to be part of a community? Eliza asked Caleb quietly. When the community's worth being part of? Yes. They were loading their supplies when William Thornton appeared holding an umbrella against the rain. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Morgan, I'm glad I caught you. There's been a development you should know about. Good or bad? Caleb asked, instantly alert. Potentially both. The federal investigation has expanded. They've uncovered similar land fraud schemes in 3 other territories. The government wants to create a permanent task force, and they want Mrs. Carter to help lead it. Lead it? Eliza was stunned. I haven't even started the advocate position yet. Your story has reached Washington. You're being held up as an example of courage in the face of corruption. They're offering you a senior position with real authority to help victims and prosecute offenders. That's a far cry from part-time advocacy work, Caleb observed. It would mean more time in town, possibly some travel, but also more money and, more importantly, more ability to help people. Thornton handed her an envelope. The official offer. You don't need to decide immediately. As Thornton departed, Eliza stood in the rain staring at the envelope. This changes things, she said softly. Does it? You'd still be doing what you wanted, helping women in your situation, just on a larger scale. But what about the ranch, our plans? Plans can adapt. The question is, what do you want? Before she could answer, a commotion erupted down the street. A woman was screaming, and people were running toward the sound. Caleb and Eliza followed, finding a crowd gathered around a young woman who was clearly in distress. "He's going to kill me," she was sobbing. "Please, someone help me." Eliza pushed through the crowd, kneeling beside the woman. She was perhaps 20, with bruises on her face and arms, her dress torn. "Who's going to kill you?" Eliza asked gently. "My husband. He found out I went to the sheriff about the beatings. He said he'd kill me before he'd let me leave." Eliza looked up at Caleb, who was already scanning the crowd, looking for threats. Then she turned back to the woman. "What's your name?" "Sarah. Sarah Mills." "Sarah, you're safe now. We won't let him hurt you." "You don't understand. He owns the bank. He owns half the town. No one will stand against him." "I will," Eliza said firmly, "and so will others." As if to prove her wrong, the crowd began dispersing, people suddenly remembering urgent business elsewhere. Soon, only Eliza, Caleb, and a few others remained. "See?" Sarah said desperately. "They're all afraid of him." "Where is he now?" Caleb asked. "At the bank, but he'll come looking soon. Then we get you somewhere safe." Eliza helped the woman to her feet. "Reverend Thompson's house. Your husband won't violate a church." They hurried through the rain to the parsonage, where Reverend Thompson's wife immediately took charge of Sarah, clucking over her injuries and promising protection. "This is what you'd be fighting," Caleb told Eliza quietly. "Not just land fraud, but all the ways powerful men abuse their positions." "I know." She was watching Sarah, seeing herself just weeks ago, desperate alone with nowhere to turn. "We were lucky, Caleb. We found each other. But how many women don't have that luck?" Their wedding the next morning was interrupted before it began. Samuel Mills, the banker, arrived at the church with 3 armed men demanding his wife be returned. "She's my property," he declared. "The law says a wife belongs to her husband." "The law also says assault is a crime," Eliza replied, stepping between Mills and the parsonage where Sarah was hidden. "You're that Carter woman, the troublemaker. You have no authority here." Eliza pulled out the envelope Thornton had given her, removing the federal commission inside. "Actually, I do. As of this morning, I'm a federal advocate for victims of domestic violence and fraud. And you, Mr. Mills, are under investigation." It was a bluff. She hadn't accepted the position yet, but Mills didn't know that. "This is ridiculous. I want my wife back." "What you want is irrelevant," Caleb said, moving to stand beside Eliza. "The lady has requested protection, and she'll receive it." "You can't fight the whole town, Morgan. Watch me." The standoff might have turned violent, but then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Peterson from the general store stepped forward, then Rosa, then other women, forming a protective circle around the church. "Enough, Samuel," Mrs. Peterson said firmly. "We've all seen Sarah's bruises. We've all heard her cries. It ends now." "You women don't understand." "We understand perfectly," Rosa interrupted. "And if you try to force your way past us, you'll have to go through all of us." Mills looked around, realizing he was facing not just Caleb and Eliza, but half the town's women and several men who joined them. The rain continued to fall, plastering hair and clothes, but no one moved. "This isn't over," he snarled, but he and his men retreated. "It never is," Eliza murmured. The wedding proceeded an hour later with Sarah Mills as an unexpected witness. She stood beside Eliza, still bruised but no longer crying, drawing strength from this woman who'd faced down worse and survived. "Do you, Eliza Carter, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Reverend Thompson asked. "I do," Eliza said, her voice strong and clear. "Do you, Caleb Morgan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do with all my heart." "Then by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Arizona, I pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss was tender, a promise of all the kisses to come. The small congregation erupted in applause, the sound echoing off the church walls like a benediction. "Now what?" Sarah asked Eliza quietly during the small reception the town's women had hastily organized. "Now you decide what you want. Freedom, divorce, justice. I'll help you achieve it." You'd do that for a stranger. You're not a stranger. You're a woman who needs help. That makes you my responsibility. Our responsibility, Caleb corrected, joining them. My wife doesn't stand alone anymore. The word wife sent a thrill through Eliza. After everything, she was someone's wife again, but this time by choice with a man who saw her as an equal, not property. They stayed in town another day helping Sarah file charges against her husband and securing her temporary residence with a sympathetic family. Mills threatened and blustered, but with federal attention on him and the town's women united in support of Sarah, his power was significantly diminished. You've started something, Caleb told Eliza as they finally headed home to the ranch. We've started something, she corrected. This is our fight now. The ranch looked different as they approached, not physically, though Jake had clearly been busy with repairs in their absence. It looked like home, like a future, like the beginning of their real life together. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the rain-washed desert in brilliant colors, Eliza made her decision about the federal position. I'm going to accept it, she said, but with conditions. I stay based here at our ranch. I travel when necessary, but this is home, and you come with me when possible. I'd follow you anywhere, Caleb said simply, even to Washington if they call me there. Especially to Washington. Someone needs to keep those politicians honest. She laughed, leaning into his embrace. We make a good team. The best. As darkness fell, they went inside together, no longer maintaining separate rooms. Their wedding night was gentle and passionate by turns, two wounded souls finally allowing themselves to fully trust, to fully love. I never thought I'd have this, Eliza whispered in the darkness. Have what? Happiness, safety, love, a future I actually want to see. You have all of that and more. You have a purpose, a mission. You're going to help so many people, Eliza. We are. This is our work now. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. 3 days a week, Eliza worked in town helping women like Sarah navigate the legal system, documenting cases of abuse and fraud, building networks of support. The other days, she worked the ranch with Caleb, learning the horse business, building their home, both literally and figuratively. Jake became their first official employee, eager and hardworking with an intuitive understanding of horses that impressed even Caleb. Other young men from the valley sought work as well, and soon they had a proper operation running. The first letter from Washington arrived 6 weeks after their wedding. The federal government was impressed with Eliza's initial reports and wanted her to testify before Congress about the need for stronger protections for women and settlers. Congress, Eliza said, staring at the letter. They want me to speak to Congress. You've earned it, Caleb said proudly. Your work here has already helped a dozen women. Imagine what you could do with federal backing. Come with me. Try to stop me. They prepared for the journey carefully. Jake would manage the ranch with Miguel's help. Sarah Mills, now divorced and working at the general store, would handle Eliza's local cases. The network of support they'd built would continue functioning in their absence. The night before their departure, Morrison escaped from federal prison. The news came via urgent telegram, Colonel Wade himself, warning them to be careful. Morrison had killed 2 guards in his escape and was believed to be heading their way. We should postpone the trip, Caleb said immediately. No, we can't live in fear of him forever. Besides, he'd expect us to ford up here. Leaving might be the safest option. Or we're leading him to Washington where you'll be exposed and vulnerable. I'll have you. That's all the protection I need. Caleb wasn't convinced, but he understood her determination. They'd fought too hard for their freedom to let Morrison dictate their lives again. They left at dawn, taking a circuitous route to the railroad station in Tucson. Caleb was armed and watchful, but they saw no sign of Morrison. The train journey east was Eliza's first, and despite the circumstances, she found herself entranced by the changing landscape, desert giving way to plains to forests, the country vast and varied. It's so big, she murmured, watching Nebraska roll past. Makes our troubles seem smaller, doesn't it? No, it makes me realize how many people might be suffering like I was, like Sarah was. The bigness means there's more work to do. In Chicago, where they had to change trains, a man approached them in the station. Eliza tensed, but he merely handed Caleb a telegram and disappeared into the crowd. Morrison spotted in Colorado, Caleb read. Heading north, not east. Colonel Wade thinks he's going to Canada. Running. Or regrouping. Either way, he's not our immediate problem. Washington, D.C. overwhelmed Eliza with its grandeur and bustle. The wide boulevards, the imposing government buildings, the sense of power and purpose. It was as far from the Arizona desert as she could imagine. Their hotel was modest but clean, and that evening Thornton visited to prepare Eliza for her testimony. The committee is sympathetic, he explained, but there are those who believe federal intervention in domestic matters is overreach. You need to make them understand that this isn't just about individual victims, it's about the fabric of society, about justice and human dignity. No pressure, Eliza said dryly. You face down gunmen. Politicians should be easy by comparison. But standing before the congressional committee the next morning, Eliza felt more nervous than she had facing Morrison. These men, in their fine suits and serious expressions, held the power to help thousands of women or to condemn them to continued suffering. Mrs. Morgan, the committee chairman began, tell us your story. So she did, simply honestly without embellishment. She told them about Thomas's death, the false debts, the forced flight from her home. She told them about Morrison and the bounty hunters, about hiding in the desert, about the good people who'd helped her and the corrupt ones who'd tried to destroy her. But my story isn't unique, she continued, finding her strength as she spoke. In the 6 weeks since I began working as an advocate, I've documented 17 cases of women being defrauded, abused, or driven from their homes by men who use the law as a weapon. Sarah Mills, whose husband beat her for years while the local law looked away. Margaret Patterson, whose brother-in-law seized her farm after her husband died, claiming debts that never existed. Ana Rodriguez sold into marriage at 14 to settle her father's gambling losses. She pulled out a leather portfolio not unlike the one Murphy had carried. These are their stories, documented, witnessed, undeniable. And they represent hundreds, maybe thousands more who suffer in silence because they have no one to speak for them. Mrs. Morgan, one congressman interrupted, while these stories are tragic, is it really the federal government's place to intervene in local matters? Sir, when local law is corrupted, when it serves the powerful instead of the vulnerable, where else can these women turn? The federal government intervened to free the slaves. Was that overreach? It intervened to stop monopolies from crushing workers. Was that wrong? This is no different. It's about protecting citizens who cannot protect themselves. But surely existing law says a husband can beat his wife as long as the stick is no thicker than his thumb. Existing law says a woman's property becomes her husband's upon marriage. Existing law offers no recourse when powerful men conspire to steal from widows and orphans. The law, sir, is not enough. Not when those enforcing it are part of the problem. The hearing went on for 3 hours. Eliza answered every question, challenged every assumption, and by the end she could see she'd made an impact. Several congressmen who'd seemed skeptical were now nodding thoughtfully. Thank you, Mrs. Morgan, the chairman said finally. Your testimony has been illuminating. We'll consider your recommendations carefully. Outside the Capitol building, Caleb swept her into an embrace. You are magnificent. I was terrified. That's what made it magnificent. You were terrified and you did it anyway. They spent another week in Washington meeting with various officials, building support for the new protections Eliza advocated. The city's energy was infectious, and Eliza found herself imagining a future where she could make real change on a national level. But she also missed the desert, the quiet of their ranch, the simple rhythm of their life there. Homesick, Caleb asked one evening, finding her staring out their hotel window. Is it strange to miss a place I've only lived for 2 months? Not when it's home. Real home, not just a house. I want to do this work, Caleb. I want to help these women. But I also want our life in Arizona. Am I being greedy, wanting both? You're being human, and lucky for you, you married a man who's very good at logistics. We can make both work. The telegram arrived their last night in Washington. It was from Jake, and it was urgent. Ranch attacked. Morrison here. Come quickly. They left on the first train west. Caleb grim and focused Eliza, trying not to imagine what they'd find when they arrived. The journey seemed endless, each mile an eternity of worry. At the Tucson station, Tom Brennan was waiting with horses and worse news. Jake's hurt bad, he said without preamble. Miguel, too. They fought hard, but Morrison had too many men. How many? Caleb asked. Started with 6. Jake and Miguel took down 3 before Morrison got past them. The ranch, still standing but damaged. Morrison's holed up there with his remaining men. Says he'll burn it down if anyone approaches. He wants us, Eliza said. This was always about us. They rode hard through the night, reaching the valley as dawn broke. The ranch looked wrong windows, broken smoke damage on the walls, the coral fence smashed. But the house stood, and from within they could see movement. Morrison, Caleb called out. We're here. Let's end this. Morrison appeared in the doorway, looking haggard and half mad. Prison had not been kind to him, and his escape had taken a further toll. The famous Morgans, he said mockingly, the couple that destroyed everything I built. You destroyed yourself, Eliza replied. We just exposed the truth. Truth. You want to talk about truth. The truth is power matters, strength matters, and you too represent everything weak about this new world. A disgraced soldier and a runaway widow thinking you can change how things work. We already have, Caleb said. Your world is ending, Morrison. The old ways of corruption and brutality are dying. Not if I kill you first, both of you right here where it started. Then I disappear into Mexico with enough gold to start over. You're surrounded, Tom Brennan called out. And indeed, the valley's ranchers had assembled again, forming a circle around the property. You're not disappearing anywhere. Morrison laughed wildly. Then we all die together. He held up a lamp oil already dripping from its base. I drop this, the whole place goes up. Your precious ranch, your symbol of new beginnings, ashes. You'd die too, Caleb pointed out. I'm already dead. The moment you put me in that federal prison, I was dead. This is just finishing it. Eliza stepped forward past Caleb's restraining hand. No, I won't let you destroy what we've built. You've taken enough. Stay back. But she kept walking slowly, steadily, her eyes never leaving Morrison's. You know what the difference is between us, Morrison. You think power comes from fear, from force. But real power comes from surviving what should have destroyed you and choosing to help others do the same. Pretty words won't stop me from... The shot came from behind Morrison. He looked down in surprise at the spreading red stain on his chest, then collapsed the lamp, falling harmlessly to the side. Behind him stood Sarah Mills holding a smoking rifle. He killed my husband, she said simply. Samuel tried to stop him from taking the ranch, and Morrison shot him. I thought you should know Samuel died trying to do right in the end. The remaining 2 outlaws surrendered, immediately thrown into confusion by their leader's death. The ranchers swarmed in, securing the men and checking the damage. Jake was inside, bandaged but grinning weakly. Told you I could handle the ranch, boss. You did good, son, Caleb said, gripping his shoulder. Real good. Miguel was worse off a bullet in his shoulder, but Rosa was tending him with fierce efficiency. He'll live, she announced, too stubborn to die. As the sun rose, fully illuminating the damage, but also the solidarity of their community, Eliza stood with Caleb surveying their domain. It's over, she said. Really over this time. Morrison's over. But your work is just beginning, she nodded, thinking of the congressional hearing, the women waiting for help, the changes that were coming. Our work. Always are. The ranch was repaired within a month, the community coming together to rebuild what Morrison had tried to destroy. The federal protection bill passed 3 months later with Eliza's testimony cited as crucial to its passage. She traveled when needed, spreading the network of advocacy across the territory and beyond. But she always returned to the ranch, to Caleb, to the life they were building together. A year after Morrison's death, as spring brought wildflowers to the desert, Eliza stood on the porch watching their expanded horse operation. 50 head now, with bloodlines that were attracting buyers from as far as California. Regrets? Caleb asked, joining her. None. Only that it took so long to find you. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. We found each other when we needed to. That's what matters. Mrs. Morgan, Jake called from the corral. That Arabian mare is about to foal. They hurried to the barn where indeed the mare was in labor. It was a difficult birth requiring all their combined skills, But finally, a beautiful colt stood on wobbly legs, dark as midnight, with a white star on his forehead. "He's perfect," Eliza breathed. "Like his owners," Caleb said, kissing her temple. "Flatterer. Truth-teller." As they watched the colt take his first uncertain steps, Eliza reflected on her own journey. From desperate flight to established advocate, from widow to wife, from victim to victor. The transformation hadn't been easy or painless, but it had been necessary. "I want to expand the program," she said suddenly. "Create a proper refuge here at the ranch, somewhere women can come to heal, to learn skills, to start over. That's a big undertaking. We have the space. And with the government funding, I wasn't objecting. I was thinking we'll need to build a dormitory, maybe convert the old barn." She turned to him in delight. "You'd support this?" "Eliza, I'd support you if you wanted to fly to the moon. A refuge for abused women. That's not just supportable, it's necessary. It means our privacy will be limited, our quiet life disrupted. Our life was never going to be quiet, not with you fighting injustice and me trying to keep up." He smiled. "Besides, this ranch was too empty with just us. It needs purpose, like we needed each other." The refuge opened 6 months later with Sarah Mills as its first director. Women came from across the territory, some fleeing violence, others poverty, all seeking the second chance Eliza had found. The main house was expanded, the barn converted, small cabins built for families. The horse operation provided work and training, while Eliza's government position ensured legal protection and advocacy. "You've built something amazing," Thornton told her during a visit to inspect the facility for federal funding purposes. "We've built it," Eliza corrected, watching Caleb teach a group of women basic self-defense. "None of this would exist without him. You two are quite the team. There's talk in Washington of expanding this model nationally." "One refuge at a time," Eliza said. "We need to prove it works first." But it did work. Women who arrived broken and afraid left strong and skilled. Some stayed in the area, finding work and building new lives. Others returned home with the tools to fight their own battles. All carried with them the knowledge that they weren't alone, that there was a place in the desert where a woman named Eliza Morgan understood their pain and would fight for their freedom. 5 years after that night in the sandstorm shack, Eliza stood in the same spot where she'd first pointed a gun at Caleb. The shack still stood maintained now as a reminder of beginnings. "Sentimental journey?" Caleb asked, appearing behind her as he always seemed to when she needed him. "Grateful journey. If that storm hadn't driven me here, if you hadn't been waiting, I'd probably still be building that ranch alone, turning into a bitter hermit. And I'd be dead or worse. Instead, we have this." He gestured to the valley spread below where their ranch had become a small community. The refuge, the horse operation, the families who'd settled nearby to be part of something meaningful. "We have everything," Eliza agreed. As they rode back home, the setting sun painting the desert in shades of gold and rose, they passed a new arrival at the refuge, a young woman with a black eye and trembling hands clutching a small child. Eliza stopped dismounting to approach the woman. "You're safe now," she said gently, the same words that had been said to her so many times. "Whatever you're running from, whoever hurt you, they can't reach you here." The woman began to cry, and Eliza held her, this stranger, who wasn't really a stranger at all. Just another soul seeking shelter from the storm. Later that evening, as they sat on their porch, the same porch where they'd fought Morrison, where they'd declared their love, where they'd planned their future, Caleb took Eliza's hand. "No regrets?" he asked their old ritual. "None," she replied as always. Except, I wish everyone could find what we found. The chance to start over, to be loved for who they really are, to build something from nothing but determination and trust. That's not regret. That's purpose. And you're giving others that chance every day." "We are," she corrected as she always did. "Yes," he agreed, pulling her close as the stars emerged in the clear desert sky. "We are." The coyotes called in the distance, no longer a sound of danger, but simply the voice of the desert, wild and free. The ranch settled into evening quiet, though it was never truly quiet anymore. Too many lives being rebuilt, too many futures being forged. But at its heart, in this house that had sheltered them through violence and into peace, Eliza and Caleb Morgan had created something unprecedented in that harsh land, a place where the broken could become whole, where the hunted could find shelter, where love could grow despite the desert's attempts to kill everything soft and green. Their story had begun with desperation, and a gun with a woman running for her life, and a man who'd lost everything for doing right. It had evolved through violence and justice, through fear and courage, through the discovery that two damaged souls could create something stronger than either could achieve alone. And now, 5 years later, their story continued not as an ending, but as an eternal beginning, each day bringing new challenges and new victories, new arrivals seeking shelter, and new successes as women reclaimed their lives. "I love you," Eliza said into the darkness, words that still felt like a miracle after years of having love beaten out of her by her first husband. "And I love you, Caleb replied, more each day, which I didn't think was possible. "We should go in. Early day tomorrow, 3 new arrivals, and that congressional delegation to tour the facility. In a moment, I want to remember this you and me here now, perfect despite everything that tried to make it otherwise." So they sat a while longer, two people who'd found each other in the worst of circumstances, and built from that meeting a life of purpose and meaning. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of rain, the eternal cycle of hardship and renewal that defined this land they'd chosen to call home. Inside the main house, Sarah Mills was settling the new arrivals, her own transformation from victim to advocate complete. In the barn, Jake tended to the horses, including the midnight colt, who'd grown into a magnificent stallion. Throughout the small community that had grown around the refuge lives were being lived dreams being pursued, second chances being seized. And at the center of it all, Eliza and Caleb Morgan continued their unlikely love story, a tale that had begun with a desperate woman stumbling into a shack where a disgraced soldier waited out a sandstorm and had become something neither could have imagined, a beacon of hope in the desert, proof that love and justice could flourish, even in the harshest ground, that two broken people could build something whole and offer that wholeness to others. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs. But beneath them, in this corner of the Arizona desert, a revolution was quietly taking place. One woman at a time, one life at a time. One act of courage, building on another until the impossible became inevitable: change, growth, redemption, and above all, love.